Chapter 2088, The Depressed Wolf. 1. Green Vessel roared a few times to show his dissatisfaction and anger before he disappeared unwillingly. At this time, Evildoer turned to look at Green and asked indifferently, "What the hell do you want to do?" "What am I doing?" "I'm doing this for their own good." When Sung heard this, he said with an aggrieved expression. However, the evildoer didn't fall for this. "Alright, stop acting pitiful in front of me. I won't be fooled." Evildoer held his forehead helplessly and exposed him. However, Cold didn't care and continued to use his watery black eyes to affectionately look at Evildoer. Evildoer couldn't help but shiver. Then, he couldn't take it anymore and roared, "If you make that expression again, don't blame me for being impolite. This is my territory, my dear. How do you want to be impolite to me?" Sung Ching glanced at Evildoer and asked with a smile. Her little face was filled with curiosity. Upon hearing this, the demon wilted. He hated Sung in his heart, but there was nothing he could do about it. This kind of feeling was very uncomfortable, and he could also understand Green Vessel's depression more. Never in his wildest dreams would he have thought that he and Ching Ju would one day become a pair of brothers in the same boat. This situation was too amazing. At the thought of this, the evildoer glared at Azure fiercely. Then, he turned his head away in anger and no longer wanted to bother with it. When Sung saw this, he laughed extremely happily. The entire control room was empty, and his wild laughter echoed occasionally. This feeling was really great. Azure thought to himself that he could take advantage of them before they recovered their strength. Otherwise, once they recovered to their peak, he would probably not have such an opportunity. As he thought about this, Azure's gaze towards Evildoer deepened. Instantly, Evildoer became alert. At this moment, other than Leng Ruoxue, Uncle Long and the others were not having a good time either. Even though they were in different places, they were in the same place. The environment was also far worse than Leng Ruoxue's. Looking at the blood-red sky and the vast plain, Uncle Long and the others felt even more depressed. They could not be happy no matter what. Moreover, the place they were in was filled with blood and a cold aura, which made them feel particularly uncomfortable. Especially the Great Elder, when he saw the blood-red sky and the air filled with the smell of blood, he almost vomited. One should know that he was only a weapon refiner, the focus of his cultivation was naturally on refining weapons. He did not like fighting and killing, but now he was suddenly transported to such a place. How could he remain calm? After standing there stupidly for a while, his little heart was already trembling. His natural sense of danger also made him instinctively resistant to this place. Forcing himself to calm down, the Great Elder lit a fire to keep himself warm. The temperature here was unimaginably low. If he wasn't a cultivator and had the strength of a divine emperor, he would have been frozen into an ice sculpture long ago. After lighting the fire, he stayed by the fire without any appetite. After sitting for a while, he, like Leng Ruoxue, wanted to take out his house to rest but realized that he could not do so. Instantly, the Great Elder was so angry that his entire body was trembling. This was a scam. Wasn't this a scam? Do you still want to live? After scolding him, the Great Elder had no choice but to accept this fact. Because just now, Sung's voice rang in his mind. That bad guy had told him directly that he couldn't take out the house from here. This fact made First Elder so depressed that he almost vomited blood. In the end, the Great Elder had no choice but to accept his fate. Fortunately, he had the habit of carrying a tent with him. Otherwise, he would have to sleep in the open in this damn place. After setting up the tent, First Elder had just entered the tent when he heard waves of wolf howls. Instantly, he was shocked and thought to himself, no way. This wasn't a forest, so why would there be wolves? As far as he knew, wolves generally didn't like the plains. There was no cover, so it was very inconvenient for them to do things, and it was easy for them to be discovered by the enemy. So what was this wolf howl about? Did I hear wrong? For a moment, the Great Elder doubted his own hearing, but as the sound of running got closer and closer, and the wolf howls that rose and fell, it was impossible for him to deceive himself. Thinking of this, he simply opened the tent and walked out. The moment he stepped out, he staggered and almost fell. Oh my God! What were these blood-red things that had merged with the sky and only left 2 pairs of green eyes? Did he have to be so scamming? The Great Elder confirmed it again and again, and finally confirmed that these creatures in front of him were really wolves. There were also countless wolves. Because the color of the wolves blended well with the sky, he could only see countless green eyes flashing in front of him. He even heard the wolves drooling. Although he had seen many wolf packs before, and Schweier's bracelet even had a silver wolf pack, but they were all wolves, and the ones in front of him were definitely the kind that he could not bear to love. The smell of blood on these wolves rushed straight into the chief elder's nose, making him want to vomit frequently. However, he forcibly held it back. He did not dare to vomit in front of these inhumane wolves. Otherwise, he was afraid that he would be the next one to enter their stomachs. The first elder supported his weak legs and forced himself to calm down. Then, he put on a stiff smile and said, "May I know what business brings you here so late at night?" "What business?" "Ha, old man, why do you sound so wishy-washy? What else could we be here for?" "Of course, we're here to kill." The leading wolf sneered when he heard First Elder's words. The Great Elder was actually quite embarrassed after listening to the Alpha's words. However, he was used to being polite to outsiders and foreign beasts. It was not in his nature to fight when he saw them. Therefore, he really could not put on a fierce and evil appearance. However, it was indeed a little ridiculous to be polite to these wolves that reeked of blood. However, a good habit could not be changed in a short time. The First Elder was depressed for a moment before he spoke again. "Everyone, if you're here to kill me, I can only regretfully tell you that it's not worth it to kill me." How was it not worth it? Tell me about it." The Alpha's curiosity was piqued, and it asked with a pair of straight, cold, green eyes. "First of all, my meat is too little, and you have too much. It's definitely not enough to split. Second, I'm a famous weapon forger. If you don't kill me, we can make a deal. I can refine weapons for you. That way, when you fight for territory with other beasts in the future, your chances of winning will be higher. What do you think?" The Great Elder quickly said. He had thought of this on the spot, but he didn't know if the wolf in front of him would be interested in what he said. Chapter 2089, The Depressed Wolf, 2. However, after hearing the First Elder's words, the leader wolf pondered for a while and then laughed wildly. "Ha ha ha. You humans are too cunning. Isn't making a deal with you humans the same as asking a tiger for its skin? Do you think he'll fall for it? I won't lie to you." The Great Elder promised sincerely. He really did not want to fight with these wolves. Although the strength of these wolves was not high, and the leader wolf was only at the Divine King level, but there were too many of them. Even a reverent god would be depressed and go crazy if they were to fight one after another. Moreover, he was not good at fighting and did not like fighting. Therefore, if there were other ways to solve the problem at hand, he would not hesitate to choose other methods. But these wolves were obviously not that easy to talk to. AI. What should he do? It would be great if Schweier was here. She would definitely have a way to deal with these wolves. At this moment, he missed Leng Ruoxue dearly. However, he could only think about it. Here, he would never have the chance to meet Leng Ruoxue. When the Alpha heard the Great Elder's guarantee, it still looked at the Great Elder with suspicion. The Great Elder's heart became even more depressed when he saw this. It seemed that he didn't keep his word in front of these wolves. But then the Great Elder was relieved. These wolves probably hadn't heard of him. He consoled himself. Otherwise, the head wolf's distrustful gaze would drive any normal person crazy. Moreover, why was he competing with an inexperienced wolf? In an instant, a feeling of boredom welled up in the Great Elder's heart. He quickly threw these thoughts out of his mind and started thinking of ways to deal with the wolf pack in front of him. However, after thinking about it for a long time, the Great Elder helplessly discovered that he was at his wit's end. Was he really going to let these wolves do whatever they wanted? No. He could not be so passive. In any case, he was a deity emperor and a person of status in the divine realm. If he were to lose without a fight, he wouldn't be able to survive in the divine realm after this news spread. The moment this thought appeared, the first elder's aura skyrocketed. An unprecedented fighting spirit was ignited in his heart, and soon, it burned into a raging fire. The chieftain wolf was confused for a moment, but it quickly regained its senses and looked at the great elder excitedly. It even let out a few loud howls. It looked like the old man in front of him was planning to fight. Hee hee. That's great. The chieftain wolf was so excited that it almost danced with joy. Panting heavily, it pounced and charged directly at the great elder. The great elder was shocked and hurriedly used the divine power in his body to block the attack of the alpha wolf. With a bang, the alpha wolf's attack missed, and it was instantly enraged. All the fur on its body stood up, and it seemed to be burning with flames. The moisture from its bloody mouth sprayed directly at the great elder's face, and the great elder quickly jumped back to avoid the unpleasant smell. This wolf had never brushed its teeth before. The great elder finished his appraisal. Yo! Old man, I didn't expect you to have such skill. The alpha wolf ridiculed in a depressed manner when it saw the first elder jump away with extreme speed. Humph. I'm not just a man with two skills. The great elder obviously didn't care about the praise of the leader wolf. He couldn't help but complain in his heart. Don't think that just because you're not good at fighting, you really don't have any combat experience. In fact, he just didn't fight often. Oh, really? Then I'll have to see for myself. The leader wolf said. Then, he turned to his underlings and said, Children, surround this old man. In a while, I'll make you some soup. It meant that they were going to take turns to fight. Yes. The deafening sound reverberated across the vast plain, and the depression in the great elder's heart could not be described with words. Needless to say, he was definitely the ingredient for the soup. However, he would not let these wolves have their way. He was the head elder of the blacksmith guild. How could he become a meal for these wolves? With this thought in mind, the grand elder began to attack. He took out a long sword. The sword was fiery red and exuded a scorching heat. It was obvious that this was a fire attribute sword. The heat on the sword was enough to roast any living creature. This sword was newly refined by him according to his own attributes. He had never used it before, and this sword was one of the tests that Qing Ju gave him. As for the heat on the sword, it was because after the sword was successfully refined, Shuer had once infused a trace of her life flame into the sword. Therefore, this sword was not only his trump card, but also his greatest life-saving card. However, he did not expect that his trump card would be exposed so early. However, the situation in front of him did not allow him to think too much. After he injected divine power into the sword, he used it to coordinate with the sword technique. Countless sword cheese with sword flowers that flickered with starlight attacked the wolf pack that had already surrounded him. Hee hee. Shuer was the one who taught him this. Arg. Ah. Ah. With a few screams, the wolves that were hit by the sword chi were instantly annihilated. The chieftain wolf's heart trembled when it saw this, but it still glared at the attacking great elder with a calm expression. Then, it continued to encourage its subordinates, Don't be afraid of this old man, attack. Let's attack together. Charge. Kill this old man. Some of the wolves howled, and some howled in cooperation. In an instant, the momentum of the wolf pack shook the sky. The great elder narrowed his eyes and attacked even faster, more ruthlessly, and more accurately. Almost every time he struck, he would kill countless wolves, and the wolf pack began to panic and be at a loss. The alpha wolf didn't expect this weak-looking old man to have such a strong attack. Woo! What should it do? Its subordinates were dying in groups, which made it feel even more insecure. At the thought of this, it roared loudly and pounced toward the great elder again. The great elder, who was waving the sword in his hand, was having great time killing. Suddenly, he felt a murderous aura. Without thinking, he instinctively turned his hand. Then, the alpha wolf was tragically cut in two by the sword chi. Its eyes were wide open in disbelief before it died. It died with grievances. With the death of the leader wolf, the wolf pack immediately fell into chaos. However, the great elder wasn't kind enough to let them go. He immediately ran away. Buzz! He swung his sword a few more times, and the fiery red sword flowers hit the wolves. Instantly, they were all turned into ashes. After the battle, the great elder was so tired that he sat on the ground and panted heavily. AI. This gang fight was really not something that humans should do. Fortunately, he had this sword. Otherwise, he might have been the one to die today. Even if he wasn't, he would have been seriously injured. The great elder sighed and sat on the ground, too lazy to get up. Then, he couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. He didn't know what the hell this place was. It was only the first day, and he had already fought with the wolves. He didn't know what would appear later. Chapter 2090, The Depressed Wolf, 3, Senior Tsung is really too much of a cheat. Although he was hiding his resentment, he only dared to think about it in his heart and did not dare to show it. After sitting enough on the ground, he went back into the tent to rest. Otherwise, if he encountered any more beast groups, wouldn't he be in for a tragedy? The great elder didn't rest well that night, because he still had to keep a trace of his divine sense out to pay attention to the movements outside. He finally sneaked out of the tent until dawn. The daytime here was only a little better than when he had first come in. The sky was still blood red, but it was much brighter and the smell of blood was lighter. From this, he was sure that it was night time when he first came here. But he still didn't like the daytime here. Moreover, he also believed that as long as it was a normal person, no one would like it here. After tidying up the tent and having a simple meal, the great elder prepared to leave. Not long after he left, the space there twisted, and then, blood-red figures appeared. If the great elder was here, he would definitely find that these people were the wolves he had killed before. Yes. The dead wolves were resurrected. It could also be said that they would never truly die, because they did not really exist. Although they looked no different from the wolf clan with flesh and blood, they were all illusions created by Tsung. As soon as these wolves were resurrected, they all gathered around the alpha wolf with lingering fear on their faces. Old ancestor, that human is so terrifying. Hearing the younger wolf, he said in a baby voice. What are you afraid of? We won't really die. The chieftain wolf consoled him. In fact, it was quite depressed. It didn't expect that it would be at a disadvantage in the first battle. To think that it had boasted in front of its master that it would definitely not let the humans who entered this place have an easy time. Sob. It was too ashamed to see its master. But will master blame us for being useless? The wolf cub asked worriedly. I won tea. That human strength is already above us. The alpha wolf said with certainty. In fact, it was not sure in its heart, but in front of its subordinates, it could only bite the bullet and say so. But after the wolf cub heard this, it was not completely at ease. Moreover, there was one thing that it did not say, and that was that they had a lot of people. However, seeing that everyone was in low spirits, it definitely couldn't say this out loud. The alpha wolf also noticed this. It cleared its throat and said in a serious tone, My children. Although we've had a bad start, you don't have to be discouraged. That old man is still too strong for us. Next time, we'll find someone with lower strength to practice with. I believe that with our will battle, any human will be weak in front of us. The alpha wolf's purpose was to boost its momentum, but the wolves who heard it were obviously disinterested. It could be seen that they had been hit hard. Seeing this, the leader wolf was extremely anxious. The wolf pack's momentum was weak, what should he do? Wasn't this the will of the heavens? Sob. Its heart was filled with tears. After a long time. My children. The alpha wolf spoke again. I just used my divine sense to investigate, and there just so happens to be a woman in the forest not far from us. That woman only has the strength of a god king and is definitely someone we can deal with. Everyone, let's go. Following its howl, the pack of wolves howled as well. Needless to say, its target this time was Leng Ruoxue. As for Leng Ruoxue, who was in the forest, she had no idea that she had been targeted by a pack of wolves that had suffered a great blow. However, even if she knew, she would not care. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue had just come out of her tent. It had suddenly rained heavily last night. Hence, she was just like First Elder, not having a good rest. However, as a cultivator, sleep was not the most important thing. So, after taking a few medicinal pills to replenish her Shen power and physical strength, she became refreshed and radiant again. Then, she prepared to make something to eat. Although cultivators didn't need to eat every day, she was an ordinary human who cultivated up to this stage. Naturally, she still maintained the habit of eating 3 meals. More importantly, to her, food wasn't for filling her stomach, but for enjoyment. So, no matter where she was, she didn't want to torture her stomach. After taking out a small pot, she also took out some rice and seafood to cook a delicious seafood congee. Not long after, the fragrance of the congee wafted through the entire forest. At the same time, the alpha wolf, who was leading a large group of people to the forest, also anxiously led the group to run. It was very afraid that the woman would leave. More importantly, the unknown fragrance in the air always made it drool involuntarily. After Leng Ruoxue had finished cooking the steaming hot porridge, she had already started eating. By the time the alpha wolf and the wolf pack arrived, the pot was already empty, but the fragrance in the air was still thick and had not dissipated. Seeing this, the alpha wolf sniffed the air and narrowed its sinister eyes. It roared, "Human! What good stuff are you eating? Hurry up and hand it over." Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but raise her head and cast a disdainful glance at the alpha, who was glaring at her. She smiled faintly and said, "Are you trying to rob me?" In fact, before she finished the porridge, she had already noticed these wolves. However, she sensed that these wolves were not very strong, so she did not take it to heart. But now, after hearing the words of the leader wolf, she could not help but laugh to herself. Although she didn't know where this place was, since it was Azure who had sent them here, the creatures here should have been arranged by Azure to accompany them for special training. In that case, she naturally didn't need to please these wolf pups. Moreover, she wanted to see how far Azure's special training would go. Therefore, from the beginning, her tone was not very good. She wanted to anger them. When the alpha heard Leng Ruoxue's words, it was indeed fooled. It roared, "That's right, we're here to rob you. Hurry up and hand over all your good stuff." "What if I don't?" Leng Ruoxue's beautiful face was filled with curiosity as she asked. "If you don't hand it over, you'll die." The alpha wolf howled in an imposing manner, and the rest of the pack followed suit. Leng Ruoxue's smile became even more radiant. "Dead? It won't be easy to kill me," Leng Ruoxue said calmly. "Humph. Humans. You are too confident. Don't you see that I have so many subordinates?" The chieftain wolf pulled its neck and howled as a reminder. However, it couldn't help but think, "I couldn't do anything to that old man, but I can't deal with a weak woman like you." If it couldn't even defeat a woman, it didn't need to stay here anymore. Therefore, the alpha had already made up its mind to teach this smiling woman a lesson. However, while the wish was beautiful, reality was cruel. Clearly, the alpha had chosen the wrong opponent again. Others might not be able to do anything in a group battle, but Leng Ruoxue was most skilled and loved group battles. Furthermore, it was the type where the more enemies the better. As long as her meteor shower was used in conjunction with her natal flames, no matter how many enemies there were, they would be burned to ashes. Furthermore, these wolves were weak wolf tribe members that even the first elder could handle. Naturally, Leng Ruoxue did not place them in her eyes. After a long time, Len Ruoxue advised him with good intentions, "You think you can kill me just because you have the numbers? Didn't anyone tell you that numbers don't determine everything? Humph. You'll know once you try." The chieftain wolf was unwilling to be frightened and braced itself to say. In reality, it was deceiving itself and not admitting that Len Ruoxue's words were right. More importantly, it couldn't show its cowardice in front of its subordinates. Otherwise, how could it convince the public in the future? "Since you want to try, then I'll fulfill your wish." Len Ruoxue could only say this when she saw that her persuasion was ineffective. After saying that, she took out her weapon, which was also a sword. It was an extremely sharp sword that exuded a biting cold air. The coldness emitted from the sword made the weak wolves start to shiver. When the alpha wolf saw the sword, its heart skipped a beat. An ominous feeling welled up in its heart. It couldn't be that unlucky, right? Could it be that the two humans he found in succession were tough? This thought made the leader wolf depressed, but the arrow was already on the bow and had to be fired. It couldn't let its subordinates down either. Therefore, after letting out a loud roar to create some pressure on Len Ruoxue, it bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it pounced towards Len Ruoxue. Seeing this, Len Ruoxue didn't even try to dodge. She immediately sent a sword light up to the head of the pack, entangling it. The chieftain wolf was extremely annoyed by the fight. In the blink of an eye, its body was covered in wounds. However, there was no blood flowing out of its body. Len Ruoxue's beautiful eyes flickered when she saw this. She understood what was going on. Following that, she did not hold back anymore. A meteor shower shot out like thousands of stars shining with a faint light, flying towards the wolf pack from all directions. In an instant, the wolf pack was completely annihilated. They did not even have the time to cry out in pain before they died again. Then, death befell the chieftain wolf. This time, it still died with its eyes wide open. After exterminating the wolf pack, Len Ruoxue patted the dust off her hands and turned around to pack her things before leaving. As soon as she left, the wolf pack resurrected on the spot. However, this time, the wolves hugged each other and cried without saying anything. The leader wolf was so depressed that it wanted to commit suicide. But even if it committed suicide, it wouldn't die. Chapter 2091, My Dear, Just Kill Me. 1. More importantly, it could not understand why a woman was so difficult to deal with. Weren't women supposed to be very weak? That was a woman. Moreover, the swordsmanship that the woman used was even more powerful than the old man's. Why was that? The humans who looked very, very weak turned out to be very tough. This made the alpha wolf strongly doubt its own judgment. If a woman was so difficult to deal with, could they deal with the others here? Woo-woo, master. Why did you make me so weak? Powerful. I want to be strong. I don't want to be unable to deal with a woman. This hurts my self-esteem too much. I don't have the face to see the beast. The chieftain wolf was wailing and howling in its heart. The other wolves were also remorseful and sad. After these two battles, their confidence had been completely shattered into powder, which could not be picked up again. The evildoer who saw this scene through the screen turned to look at Song and said indifferently, "This is the special training you arranged for them? Those wolves obviously don't have enough confidence." Hee hee. This was just the beginning. One couldn't become a fatty in one bite. Of course, things had to be done bit by bit. They had to let them have a process of adapting. If their opponents were strong from the beginning, they would be the ones without confidence. Moreover, if the opponents are weak in the beginning, they will let their guard down. When they are completely relaxed, the little guys I arranged will be able to play their real role. Just wait and watch the show. When Azure heard evildoer's words, he laughed nonchalantly. Are you sure? Evildoer was suspicious of Tsung's words, and he believed that Tsung was just trying to trick him. Of course. Tsung was full of confidence. At the same time, the pack of wolves that were hugging each other and crying suddenly felt a warm flow in their bodies. Then, a white light completely enveloped them. When the white light disappeared, what welcomed them was the excited howls and howls of the pack of wolves. Seeing this, the monster in the control room frowned but didn't say anything. Instead, his eyes were still fixed on the light screen. First Elder and Leng Ruoshua encountered wolves, while Aojia encountered bees. The bees were huge, each about half a meter in size. They were poisonous and anyone who came into contact with them would be poisoned immediately. Although Aojia had already consumed the antidote given by Leng Ruoshua, he was still bitten by one of the bees. It was on his face and this fact made him extremely angry. His handsome face was swollen like a pig's head. However, it was fortunate that no one else saw it. Otherwise, he would have been depressed to death. But now, his face was in pain and itchiness. He was still feeling very uncomfortable. Even though the detoxification pill that Leng Ruoshua gave him could prevent him from being bitten by mosquitoes, it could not detoxify the poison of these poisonous bees. This made him feel even more depressed. At this moment, Aojia was sitting on the ground and sighing. Suddenly, he felt a dangerous aura and immediately became alert. At this time, a mocking voice sounded in his ear, "Yo, there's a pig here." Although Aojia knew that the person was talking about him, he did not want to take the person's words seriously. Hence, he only increased his vigilance and did not reply. When the voice saw that Aojia was ignoring him, it directly appeared in front of Aojia and continued to provoke him. "Pig head. I'm talking to you. Why are you acting dumb?" The person who spoke was the leader of the pack of wolves that Leng Ruoshua and First Elder had encountered earlier. He was also the wolf that had suffered the most. At that moment, it stood in front of Aojia arrogantly and confidently, provoking him continuously. Its purpose was also obvious. It wanted to infuriate the pig head in front of it and make it kill it. This way, it could advance again. Yes. After being killed by the First Elder and Leng Ruoshua in succession, the entire wolf pack had advanced in rank. Its current strength had also reached the level of a divine emperor. However, this was still not enough for it. Hence, it had specially looked for one of the most powerful people here, Aojia. However, Aojia was currently depressed and clearly did not want to bother with it. How could this be? It couldn't come here for nothing, so it had to succeed no matter what. At the thought of this, the alpha wolf attacked without saying anything. Aojia's movements were also unusually fast. He raised his hand to block and then attacked again. The alpha wolf was cut into two again. However, it died very happily this time. After the leader wolf died, the pack of wolves appeared. Seeing this, Aojia squinted his eyes and began to kill. It was a good opportunity for him to vent his anger on the wolves. These wolves were not strong enough in Aojia's eyes. After a few attacks, the wolf pack was completely annihilated. Then, Aojia patted his butt and left the place without taking a single cloud with him. After Aojia left, the wolves naturally revived. However, they hugged each other and cried. "Woo-woo. Why haven't they advanced this time? Was there not enough time?" The chieftain wolf couldn't help but think, how about this? Wait a minute. With this thought in mind, the alpha wolf appeased the wolf pack and asked them to wait. However, after waiting for 2 days, the feeling of advancing did not appear on their bodies. This time, they were depressed again. How did this happen? The leader wolf couldn't understand. This shouldn't be the case. Didn't they die again? Or was it not enough to die once? At the thought of this, the alpha decided to continue and die. After that, it went to Uncle Long. The first thing he said when he saw Uncle Long was, "Dear, kill me." Uncle Long frowned and looked at the wolf who was obviously not in his right mind. He ignored him. However, the wolf didn't give up. Instead, it continued to approach Uncle Long and even offered its head to Uncle Long. "Dear, kill me. I'm still waiting." Hearing this, Uncle Long's face darkened. Then, he shouted coldly, "Get lost. Don't let me see you again." Uncle Long was both angry and helpless. He had only been here for a few days. How did she encounter a mental illness? This was the special training that Cold gave them. Was he playing with them? For the first time, Uncle Long began to doubt Azure's authority. However, a certain wolf wasn't that easy to deal with. Besides, it would be embarrassing to leave just because you asked it to. So, the wolf was determined to play dirty and shamelessly pestered Uncle Dragon. Uncle Dragon was annoyed by it and had to kill it. The wolf died happily. Then, it was naturally the wolf's turn. After killing these wolves, Uncle Long felt nothing but depression. Moreover, he was also afraid of encountering a mental patient like the wolf. Therefore, after killing the wolf as it wished, Uncle Long quickly left. Chapter 2092, My Dear, Kill Me. 2. As soon as Uncle Long left, the wolf pack immediately resurrected. Woo! He didn't advance again. After the leader wolf howled, the pack of wolves howled as well. After howling for a long time, the leader wolf once again roused its spirit and began to lecture the other wolves. Children, don't be discouraged. We must continue to die until the end. I don't believe that we can't advance after dying once at the hands of these people. The leader wolf's words roused the hearts of the wolves. After the other wolves heard it, their faces turned red and their emotions were stirred up. They loudly echoed their ancestor, die. We must die. Let those humans kill us. Good. Children, let's go. Go find those humans and die. The leader wolf looked at its subordinate with admiration and roared. After the roar, the alpha wolf valiantly and heroically led the wolf pack on a journey to their deaths. He would not stop until he died. Just like that, after Uncle Long, the Ning family head, Cheng Wu, and the rest also encountered the wolf pack that came to die. At first, when they saw this large pack of wolves, their hearts trembled a little. However, after hearing a certain wolf's declaration of death, they immediately classified these wolves as mentally abnormal and ignored them. However, even though they ignored the wolf insisted on getting close to them. It even shamelessly walked in front of them. In the end, the master of the Ning family, Cheng Wu, and the others had no choice but to kill the wolf and his wolf pack like Uncle Long. After several deaths, a certain wolf and its pack finally advanced as they wished. This time, they cried tears of joy and cried even more miserably. Woo, it really wasn't easy. Their path of advancement could definitely be called the blood and tears of their beast lives. However, a certain wolf, who was already a reverent god-level cultivator, felt that it was all worth it. Moreover, it was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Now that it was a reverent god and the wolf pack's strength had increased greatly, it did not believe that it could not defeat those humans this time. The first thing he did after breaking through was to take revenge. This was also a disgrace to the entire wolf tribe. The target it had chosen was the first elder who had killed them. The great elder, who thought he was unlucky, saw the wolves in front of him again and thought he was seeing things. These wolves in front of him were similar to the wolves he had met before, but the strength of the wolves in front of him was more than one level higher. Therefore, he was not sure if they were the same wolves as before, but it must be related to them. Looking at the menacing wolves and their pack, the great elder knew that these wolves were here for revenge. However, he still remained calm when he faced these wolves. When the wolf saw that the old man in front of him didn't have much of a reaction after seeing him, he suddenly felt that his pride was insulted. He bared his teeth and roared, "Old man, you're dead this time." "Ah! It's really you. Aren't you all dead?" As soon as he heard this arrogant tone and voice, the first elder knew that these were the wolves he had encountered before. It seemed that the first thing these wolves did after their strength increased was to seek revenge. However, what was going on with their resurrection? The great elder was bewildered. How could we die? Human, this is our territory. A certain wolf said proudly. Then, it glanced at the first elder with contempt and continued with its head held high, "Old man, you're the one who's going to die. Then, let's try." The great elder was not very confident, and his tone was somewhat hesitant. "Damn old man, what do you mean by, try?" a certain wolf said angrily, feeling more and more displeased with this old man. This old man was clearly looking down on it. "Let's see who will die," the great elder added. Then, he looked at a certain wolf as if he was looking at an idiot. His eyes were red as he said, "You don't even understand this." A certain wolf's anger shot to the top of his head when he saw these few big words. "Then let's try it." A certain wolf howled and pounced at the great elder. Seeing this, the great elder directly jumped to the side of the open space and dodged a certain wolf's first attack. After the first attack failed, the wolf's anger grew even more. However, it still said stubbornly, "Old man, you've got some skills. You've said this before." The first elder's mouth twitched as he warned. "Damn it. Can't you just say what you've already said?" A certain wolf roared angrily, wishing he could tear the hateful old man in front of him into pieces. This old man was too good at angering wolves, wasn't he? "I can." "You can say it as many times as you want." The first elder replied perfunctorily, then took out his killer sword. The moment the wolf saw the long sword that was emitting a scorching aura, its heart trembled involuntarily. The power of the sword still lingered in its heart. This fact made it extremely sad and angry. "You can't use this sword." The wolf made an unreasonable request, because it was not the only one. When his subordinates saw the sword, they trembled even more violently than he did. Fuck. Their strength was no longer what it was in the past, alright? A certain wolf was so depressed that it wanted to cry, but it could not control its instinctive reaction. "You think you can't just because you say so? Who do you think you are?" The great elder looked at a certain wolf with disdain and said unhappily. "If he didn't use this sword, where would he get the confidence to win against them?" One had to know that the flames attached to the sword were the nemesis of all humans and beasts. At least, that was what he thought. "This king is the overlord of this place." Hearing the first elder's provocation, a certain wolf proudly announced. "You?" "I'm sorry, I really couldn't tell." The great elder's light words made a certain wolf, who had already fused with the sky, so angry that its whole body burst into flames, and its desire to tear the great elder to pieces became even stronger. "Old man, it'll make you regret this," a certain wolf said. Then, the great elder was greeted by a certain wolf's storm of attacks. The great elder was fighting with a certain wolf, and he was surrounded by countless wolves, all of them staring at him covetously. This made him feel very pressured, but he did not show it on his face. He looked extremely calm, but in fact, he was extremely nervous. However, fortunately, with the deterrence of this sword, other than the alpha wolf, the other wolves did not dare to take advantage of the situation. This also made him feel a little more at ease. At least, he would not be attacked from the front and back. However, he couldn't take it either. Thinking about the huge number of wolves, the great elder became depressed. After a certain wolf had died several times and advanced, its strength was indeed different from the past. The great elder had some difficulty dealing with it. However, looking at the wolf's ferocious appearance, he knew that this wolf was not joking with him. It really had the intention to kill him. Although the great elder knew that everything here was arranged by Tsung, he wasn't sure if they would die. After all, many big families didn't care about the death of their clansmen when they arranged the inhuman training. They only wanted the best of the best, the true elites of the family. Therefore, the great elder didn't dare to take it lightly. Instead, he tried his best to deal with the wolf and find the right time to strike. Chapter 2093, Dear, Just Kill Me. 3. Finally, the great elder found an opening and poured all his divine power into the sword. Then, he attacked a certain wolf. Ah! The wolf that was hit by the divine sword chi widened its eyes in disbelief. It looked at the wounds on its body and the burning pain in its body. Finally, it was swallowed by the flames that suddenly burst out of its body. Before it died, it still died with its eyes wide open. Seeing that their ancestor had been killed, the wolves were collectively dumbfounded. Woo, how could this be? Their strength had clearly increased, so why did they still die in the end? This didn't make sense. The wolves were really unwilling, but the Great Elder didn't give them any time to sigh. After a few sword chi swept over, the wolves also died with their eyes wide open. After another fierce battle, the Chief Elder was already drenched in sweat after exterminating the wolf pack. He took a few pills in succession before his divine power and physical strength recovered. Then, he immediately left, in case a certain wolf and its wolf pack came back to life and caused trouble for him. The moment First Elder left, Len Ruoxue arrived. However, the scenery that Len Ruoxue saw was different from the First Elder and the rest. In Len Ruoxue's eyes, the sky was a little dark, but it was still acceptable. It was just that such weather would make one feel depressed, and their mood would be affected. After finding a clean and flat place to sit down, Len Ruoxue started to start a fire to cook. She had decided to spend the night out in the open. After eating and setting up the tent, Len Ruoxue scattered some colorless and odorless powder around the tent. Then, she entered the tent with a peace of mind. Not long after she entered the tent, the space around her twisted. The wolf pack was resurrected. A certain wolf looked at the tent in front of him and felt depressed. Woo, why did he meet this woman who looked weak but was actually a fierce tigress again? Out of all these people, the person it was most afraid of and did not want to meet the most was Len Ruoxue. This was because the terrifying woman's flames had caused it to tremble in fear even now. As for its children, after seeing that woman, they did not want to be resurrected. AI. Pressure. The pressure was like a mountain. Even if they could still live after death, they didn't want to die in such an aggrieved manner. A certain wolf was so depressed that he wanted to start howling. The other wolves wanted to howl as well, but they were afraid of waking Len Ruoxue up. Hence, they could only suppress their desire to vent their anger. They held it in with all their might. Every wolf's face turned green from holding it in. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Finally, a certain wolf could not bear it any longer. He gave his children a look to retreat. Only then did the other wolves dare to leave this terrifying place carefully. Who knew that after just 2 steps, the wolves fell to the ground one after another, unconscious. What's wrong? Get up now, it's not the time to sleep. A certain wolf saw his own child fall and turned pale with fright. It called out softly, but the unconscious wolf did not give it any response. You guys, the wolf said 2 more words before falling to the ground and losing consciousness. The next morning, Len Ruoxue, who had rested for the night, walked out of her tent feeling refreshed. She saw that she had gained a lot from the previous night. In addition to some poisonous insects, wolves were also drugged by her. Moreover, those wolves looked quite familiar. However, their strength was much stronger than what she had seen before. Len Ruoxue kicked a certain wolf with the tip of her foot. Then, she threw a large water ball on the wolf's body, and the wolf slowly woke up. When he saw Len Ruoxue, a certain wolf's heart skipped a beat. It was this female devil. It didn't do anything this time. The demon wouldn't want to kill it, would it? Have we met before? Len Ruoxue caught a glimpse of a certain wolf's fear and asked indifferently. No. I've never seen him before. A certain wolf refused to admit that it had seen Len Ruoxue before, but its little heart was trembling non-stop. Woo! Its legs had gone soft. Since you've never seen it before, why are you shaking? Len Ruoxue asked, feigning curiosity. She could only react accordingly to a fellow who did not speak the truth. I'm cold. It's too cold here. A certain wolf was quick-witted and quickly said. Oh. Then what are you doing here? Are you here to kill me? Len Ruoxue smiled and asked. No, I am taking the children for a walk. I never thought of killing you. A certain wolf wanted to cry but had no tears. It did not understand why this woman who only seemed to have the strength of a divine king would give it such great pressure that it was afraid of dying. And this had absolutely nothing to do with resurrection. This was a natural instinct. A walk? Come here. Leng Ruoxu's beautiful face was filled with suspicion. Clearly, she did not believe the wolf's words. When the wolf saw this, it grinned and replied in a low voice, "Yes, the weather here is good. It's very suitable for a walk." "Oh, really? How come I didn't find this place suitable for a walk?" Suddenly, Leng Ruoxue shouted in anger. The aura around her rose sharply, causing a certain wolf to shiver in fear. His little heart trembled even more. "That's because we wolves like this place," a certain wolf said carefully. From time to time, it would sneak a glance at Leng Ruoxue from the corner of its eye. It was wailing in its heart. Woo-woo. Why is this demon so temperamental? He was so angry that he didn't even say anything in advance. He was not prepared and almost knelt down. He didn't kneel because his legs were soft and he couldn't move. "Oh, really? By the way, you guys won't die, right?" Leng Ruoxue changed the topic and asked about what she had suspected before. When a certain wolf heard this, he was dumbfounded. Why didn't this demon play by the rules? Until now, it still didn't know what the woman meant. It was a little confused. However, when a certain wolf heard this, he still said very cautiously, "This. I'm not too sure." It didn't dare to tell this woman that it would come back to life even if it died. Otherwise, if this evil demon became addicted to killing it, wouldn't it be looking for trouble for itself? Leng Ruoxue, on the other hand, replied nonchalantly, "Since you don't know either, then let me try." With that, Leng Ruoxue immediately took out her sword. However, a certain wolf had only said 2 words, "No." She then released a small flame, and the unconscious poisonous insects and wolves were set on fire. These poor guys were swallowed by the hot flame just like that. After she was done, Leng Ruoxue was not in a hurry to leave. She was waiting for the wolves to resurrect to prove her guess. The wolves that could have resurrected, upon seeing Leng Ruoxue standing guard at the same spot, did not dare to resurrect anymore. Unfortunately, there was a time limit to their resurrection. If they refused to be resurrected, they would never be able to live again. As such, no matter how unwilling the wolf pack was, they could only summon up their courage and resurrect in front of Leng Ruoxue. When Leng Ruoxue saw the wolf pack that had appeared in front of her in perfect condition, she smiled and said, "It's really you. You dared to lie to me before. You're quite bold." "No, I wouldn't dare to lie to you. That was just a white lie," a certain wolf said stubbornly, refusing to admit that he had previously lied to Leng Ruoxue. When Leng Ruoxue heard this, she was neither angry nor annoyed. Instead, she continued to ask with a smile, "All right. Even if you're telling a white lie, tell me now, why did your strength suddenly become Reverend God? Isn't this advancement speed a little too fast? I've died too many times, so I advanced. However, I can't advance even if I die again in the future. I've reached my limit, so I don't want to die anymore. Woo, let me go. Killing me will only dirty your hands." The wolf begged. It had begged to die in order to advance, but death was very painful. After being unable to advance, it naturally did not want to experience that indescribable pain. That was really worse than death. "How many times did you die before you became a reverent god?" Leng Ruoxue asked in surprise. She had not expected this to be the reason for a certain wolf's breakthrough. "Yes, I've been begging for death so much that many people think I'm mentally ill. So, please take pity on me and don't kill me. It's too painful to die." A certain wolf was playing the emotional card. Although he didn't know if this female demon would be soft-hearted, it was always right to lower his stance. Pfft. Hearing a certain wolf's complaint, Leng Ruoxue could not help but laugh. Wouldn't he be treated as a lunatic? However, wasn't this wolf leader a little too unreliable? In order to advance, he actually asked for death. Needless to say, the wolf was definitely seeking death from Uncle Long and the others. After all, this wolf was no match for Uncle Long and the others. Besides, there was no one else here. You're quite a weirdo. Len Ruoxue couldn't help but ask after she was done laughing. Thank you for the compliment. I'm shy. A certain wolf said in embarrassment, white smoke rising from his body. Upon hearing this, Len Ruoxue's face was filled with black lines. She was speechless. This wolf. Seriously. This was the first time she had seen embarrassment smoke from its body. How embarrassed was it? At the thought of this, Len Ruoxue looked deeply at a certain wolf who had his head lowered in embarrassment. Then, she left without looking back. Old ancestor, she's gone. One of the wolves reminded Len Ruoxue as they watched her leave. He left? A certain wolf could not believe it and raised its head abruptly. It only believed the truth when it saw that Len Ruoxue was no longer in front of it. However, why did that woman suddenly leave? It really couldn't understand. However, Len Ruoxue's departure still allowed the wolf to heave a sigh of relief. At least, they were safe. Then, a certain wolf howled happily, and the other wolves immediately echoed. My children. Let's go find our next opponent. This time, we must be humiliated. Without Len Ruoxue, a certain wolf would be like a monkey who claimed to be king. The wolves' morale was greatly boosted, and they followed their ancestor to find trouble with the others. Chapter 2094, Endless Battle, 1. However, this pack of wolves was not very lucky. In addition, they had an out-of-line leader. Therefore, after Len Ruoxue, they found Uncle Long, Ao Jia, and the Ning family's master. They were still abused. The three of them did not show any mercy to the wolf that was obviously mentally unstable. They even started killing it without saying a word when they saw it. After all, this was its request. After dying one after another, the alpha wolf was so depressed that it cried again. These humans were really barbaric, brutal, and unreasonable. He actually killed as he pleased without showing any mercy. What made him vomit blood was that sometimes, he was killed before he could even prepare. This fact made him feel extremely aggrieved. When the pack of wolves resurrected for the nth time and found Uncle Dragon, Ao Jia, and the master of the Ning family, the leader wolf once asked, "Why are you guys so disloyal? You didn't even give me a chance to speak before you killed me." Uncle Long and the other two gave it a reply, "Didn't you strongly request this?" In fact, they were afraid that the wolf was talking nonsense about asking for death, so they would kill it as soon as they saw it. Moreover, although this wolf had already advanced to the Reverend God level, it obviously did not have the combat power of a Reverend God level. It was timid and afraid of trouble, so they were not willing to hold back. Woo! Woo! After countless failures, a certain wolf finally gave up on looking for trouble with Uncle Long and the other two. Instead, he found a corner with no one around and lay on the ground, crying bitterly. Looking at a certain wolf's shoulders convulsing, the other wolves standing not far behind him revealed a helpless expression. Sigh. Poor old ancestor. They had thought that they could finally take revenge, but who knew that the three of them were so strong that they still could not defeat them. Moreover, in order to fight for their dignity, their ancestor had been constantly looking for trouble with the three of them. This cycle had repeated itself and they were also tormented. However, looking at their ancestor's heartbroken appearance, the wolves were too embarrassed to say anything unpleasant. Therefore, they could only stand behind him to comfort and support him silently. By the time a certain wolf finished crying, 3 days had already passed. A certain wolf, who had finally pulled himself together, wiped his tears, but he still looked at his children with a choked voice and roared, "My children. Although we can't beat those perverts, there are a few people here who aren't very strong. Let's go and take revenge on them." Its words were not very confident, and after the wolves heard it, they all looked at their old ancestor in confusion, not knowing who the few people it was referring to. Ugh! Among the humans here, there were indeed a few who were not very powerful. Like the women they had met before, they were only at the level of a divine king. However, with Len Ruox's example, they did not dare to look down on any human. However, their old ancestors seemed to be a little depressed. At the thought of this, a wolf cub couldn't help but say, "Old ancestor, I discovered that these people's strength can't be measured by levels at all. Otherwise, we'd definitely be at a disadvantage." It had to be said that this little wolf was quite intelligent. However, a certain wolf had a character of not turning back until hitting a wall. Therefore, after hearing the little wolf's words, he said very indifferently, "Don't be scared by that woman. There aren't many people like her in this world. Besides, we're not afraid of her because of her strength, but because of her flames. So, don't scare yourself. I don't believe that everyone here has her flames. What the ancestor said makes sense. Let's go and try." The little wolf said unwillingly after hearing what his ancestor had said. "That's more like it." The wolf was very satisfied with the little wolf's tactfulness. Then, it led its team to find the human that it thought was easy to deal with. Needless to say, the weak humans in his mind were naturally Cheng Wu's group. When they reappeared in front of Cheng Wu, he was only slightly surprised and said, "Are you here to die again? Kiss." The tone of his words was exactly like that of a certain wolf. "My ass. We're here to kill you." When a certain wolf heard this, he roared in anger from embarrassment. However, Cheng Wu didn't believe what it said. In his eyes, this wolf was a mentally ill one. Thus, after the wolf finished speaking, Cheng Wu immediately took out a few small red balls and threw them at the wolf pack. In an instant, the small balls exploded in the wolf pack, instantly turning it into a sea of fire. "Arg! Old ancestor! Help me!" The flames quickly devoured countless wolves. When a certain wolf saw this, its lungs almost exploded. Fuck, this human actually cheated. It was really too detestable. The consequences of a certain wolf's anger were very serious. In its fury, it pounced on Cheng Wu, who then brandished his weapon and began fighting with a certain wolf. Instantly, the saber light and the sword shadow reflected each other. It had to be said that a certain wolf's strength had increased after it had advanced to Reverend God level. However, Cheng Wu had never really fought a certain wolf before, so he was not too sure about its strength. In addition, a certain wolf was currently in a state of rage and was displaying 120% of its strength. Cheng Wu found it a little difficult to deal with it. A certain wolf's sharp claws were like short daggers, emitting a cold aura as they streaked across Cheng Wu's face like bolts of lightning. As the wolf pounced and hissed, Cheng Wu gradually felt the pressure. In the end, he could only defend himself and did not have the strength to retaliate. What was the strength of this wolf? Cheng Wu was extremely puzzled, but what he was even more puzzled about was, if this wolf had such strength, why did it come to seek death last time? Could it be that this wolf was really a wolf that was suffering? Ran out. From there, Cheng Wu's thoughts ran wild as he dealt with a certain wolf's attacks. Gradually, his physical strength and Shen power were starting to run out. However, he had brought a lot of pills with him. Thus, after feeling that he had used up too much of his energy, he quickly fed himself a few handfuls of pills. A certain wolf stared at him with wide eyes. Damn humans. He was actually eating something good in front of it. The taste of that medicinal pill was really too alluring. It also wanted to eat it. The wolves that had not been affected by the flames earlier were drooling as they stared at Cheng Wu with envious eyes. Upon seeing this, Cheng Wu smiled and asked, "Do you want to eat? Can I?" A certain wolf asked in a silly manner and stopped what it was doing. It couldn't help but feel disgusted in its heart. How could this human be so kind? Of course you can. However, as the saying goes, those who eat are short-handed. You've eaten my food, and if you continue to fight with me, wouldn't I be at a disadvantage? Cheng Wu said with a smile. He knew that he couldn't beat a certain wolf, so he could only use his wits. This wolf didn't seem to have a high IQ, so it should be very easy to trick. Sure enough, after hearing this, the wolf hesitated. However, the attraction of the pill that Cheng Wu ate was too great for it. It was definitely an instinctive attraction, and it could not resist it at all. Therefore, after thinking for a long time, the wolf finally made up its mind. Give me the pill you just ate, and we won't fight anymore. Chapter 2095, Endless Battle, 2, No problem, but I have a condition. Cheng Wu continued. What condition? A certain wolf asked with a blank face. From now on, as long as I'm here, you can't take the initiative to find trouble with me, Cheng Wu said with a serious expression. I agree. Yes. A certain wolf agreed without thinking about it this time. After all, this guy wasn't the only one here. If it didn't cause trouble for this guy, it could cause trouble for others. A certain wolf's thoughts were very beautiful. Upon hearing this, Cheng Wu generously threw a jade bottle to a certain wolf. The wolf took the jade bottle and impatiently opened the bottle cap. It wolfed down a few pills and smacked its lips in satisfaction. The gaze it used to look at Cheng Wu became much gentler. Just like that, Cheng Wu, a certain wolf, and its tribesmen became temporary neighbors. It could be said that Cheng Wu was very bold to place his residence in the territory of a certain wolf pack. However, he now had a grasp of the wolf pack's weakness and knew that a certain wolf liked good food. Therefore, he specifically catered to its preferences. In a few days, the man and wolf became brothers. A certain wolf even told Cheng Wu that it would protect this place and ensure his safety. When Cheng Wu heard this, he was so touched that he almost burst into tears. Furthermore, Cheng Wu managed to get a lot of information from the wolf. However, the low-intelligence wolf did not notice this at all. In fact, because Cheng Wu was becoming more and more pleasing to the eye, he answered almost all of Cheng Wu's questions. Unless he did not know anything, he would tell Cheng Wu everything. In the God Protection Tower's control room, the monster who saw this scene was full of admiration for Cheng Wu's ability. That guy might not be as strong as that stupid wolf, but he was very slick. Look, a certain wolf had already been completely subdued by him. He had even become his sparring partner. He wondered how Tsang would feel after seeing this. Thinking up to this point, Evildoer turned to look at Azure. Tsang. Your subordinates don't seem to be very reliable. The demon laughed. Humph. That's just my worst subordinate, the others haven't come out yet. Why are you in such a hurry? Azure said unhappily. In fact, it was also depressed in its heart. It hated the stupid wolf that embarrassed it even more. However, it would not show this kind of emotion, otherwise, it would be a joke to this damn demon. Oh, really? Then I'll wait and see. His devilish smile was filled with schadenfreude. However, it was also because of his provocation that Leng Ruoxue and the others were facing the greatest challenge of their lives. That was to fight. Furthermore, it was a battle that would never stop. As long as they let their guard down, they would be attacked by the enemy and be riddled with injuries. After Leng Ruoxue had exterminated the countless number of beasts that appeared in front of her and she was finally so tired that she sat on the ground and however, the moment she sat down, she felt a gust of cold wind. Following that, the sky darkened and she heard a buzzing sound. Immediately, a swarm of black poisonous bees flew over from afar. Leng Ruoxue's beautiful eyes narrowed. She knew that a battle was about to begin. Damn it! After grumbling and eating a few pills that could quickly replenish her physical strength and divine power, Leng Ruoxue stood up. Her sword was already in her hand, and she was just waiting for the bees to come to her. In an instant, the bee colony arrived and surrounded Leng Ruoxue. Then, in the middle of the swarm of bees, there was a fiery red light. The fiery red light suddenly grew larger and turned into a sea of fire. The bees, who had not developed sentience and only knew how to fight, were instantly swallowed by the sea of fire. A few seconds later, the swarm of bees disappeared, and a swarm of snakes followed. When Leng Ruoxue saw this, she was so angry that she wanted to curse. Damn it, is this even over? He doesn't even let me take a breath. Is he trying to tire me to death? Fortunately, she had brought enough pills with her, and she was an alchemist herself. Otherwise, she would have been at the end of her rope sooner or later. Thinking of this, she suddenly started to worry about her grandfather and the others. She knew that they had also been brought in by Azure and they had a limited number of pills in their hands. How long could they last? Moreover, could they withstand such a high-intensity, never-ending battle? She didn't know if she would have the chance to meet her grandfather and the others here. As Leng Ruoxue was thinking about this, her hands did not stop moving. The same meteor sword shower swept towards the snakes, and the snakes died the moment they touched it. After exterminating the snakes, Leng Ruoxue quickly left the area. However, she had not gone far when she encountered countless small and cute rabbits. These rabbits were not even the size of an adult's palm. They were all snowy white and fluffy, and were extremely cute. Furthermore, they were currently staring at her with a pair of watery red eyes. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue's face was filled with black lines. Was Azure trying to play the emotional card? First, he got some disgusting poisonous insects and snakes to disgust her, and now he got some cute rabbits to confuse her. However, she would not be fooled, even if these rabbits were very cute. At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue raised the sword in her hand and thousands of fiery red meteors flew towards the cute rabbits. Following that, painful wails could be heard from the rabbits. "Big sister, why did you kill us?" the struggling rabbit said with a sad face before dying. However, Leng Ruoxue was unmoved because she knew that these weren't real rabbits. Even if they were real little rabbits, she wouldn't show them any mercy. After all, this was Tsung's special training. After eliminating the rabbit, she continued to move forward. When Tsung, who was sitting in the control room, saw Leng Ruoxue kill another batch of Totoro, he pretended to be sad and said, "Woo. Nyo's really too cruel, how can you kill my clansman? That's your clansman?" Hearing this, the demon couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and ask. "Of course, I'm also a Totoro." Azure nodded, not feeling ashamed at all. However, even the demon felt embarrassed for him. This guy's lies were as real as the truth. He was too shameless. More importantly, he knew that if Shuer didn't kill the enemy who appeared in front of her, she might be the one who would be killed. This was because Azure was cold-blooded. Even if it was a special training, he didn't care about people dying. Hence, the training was extremely dangerous. But seeing Shuer fight one battle after another without stopping, his heart ached a little. However, Tsung would definitely not give him any chance to perform, nor would he let him have the chance to see Shuer. So, he could only watch Shuer's every move from the outside and encourage her. From the looks of it, Shuer's condition was pretty good, but the others were in a terrible state. Uncle Long and the others had fought more battles than Shuer. Although they were also group battles, the beasts that Uncle Long and the others had encountered were definitely a level higher than the ones Shuer had encountered. The leader had the same strength as them, and most importantly, they didn't have Shuer's abnormal flames. Therefore, every battle was a tough one for them. Chapter 2096, Endless Battle, 3, Battle. 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 For Uncle Long and the others, their daily task was to fight. There were countless beasts that came to their door. They had to fight at least 3 times a day and guard against poisonous insects at night. Just like that, a month passed. Uncle Long and the others fought until they were about to throw up. Their divine power and physical strength were quickly used up, and their pills were rapidly running out. This fact forced them to save up on pills. Unfortunately, a night's rest was not enough to replenish their energy. Thus, in a short month, they were haggard and in a sorry state. Even so, the beasts would not let them go. Therefore, they had to be on high alert every day and find opportunities to cultivate to maintain their best condition. This kind of high-intensity battle also put a lot of pressure on their hearts, but they knew that it was useless to blame the heavens and blame others. Tsung would not be soft-hearted, so everything still depended on themselves. After an unknown period of time, Leng Ruoxue and the rest had gradually gotten used to such intense battles. Furthermore, they were shocked to discover that after each battle, the rate at which they absorbed spiritual energy would increase. Although this was like a drop in the bucket to their rate of consumption, the spiritual energy in their bodies would not allow them to maintain their peak condition. However, to them, it was better than nothing. However, this discovery did not last long. Len Ruoxue and the rest realized that the number of attacks they encountered had increased every day. Needless to say, this was definitely Tsang's doing. Although this fact made them very depressed, they had no choice but to put in 120,000% of their energy to deal with the battle. And with the sudden increase in the number of attacks, their speed of absorbing spiritual energy was not enough. Ao Jia, who had just gone through a fierce battle, was lying on a huge green rock, panting heavily. He had just encountered a group of pythons. The smallest of them was nearly 10 meters in diameter, and the weakest was a divine king. He had almost vomited blood from killing them. Fortunately, there were only a dozen pythons. Otherwise, he would have died of exhaustion. AI. When would days like this end? During this period of time, the number of opponents he had encountered was more than the number he had encountered in his entire life. Moreover, the opponents he had encountered were all fierce, brutal, and would not rest until one of them was dead. They often took turns to fight, causing him to have a hard time. Every time he fought with his opponents, it was also extremely dangerous. He believed that if he could not kill those opponents, he would be the one to die in the end. Although he didn't know if he would really die, he didn't dare to take any risks. Furthermore, with his understanding of Tsang, he knew that Tsang would not be so kind as to scare them. Tsang did not care about their lives either. Thus, he had to work hard to survive. Survive. The idea of completing the special training had now become his only spiritual pillar. As Ao Jia thought about this, he tried his best to absorb the surrounding spiritual energy. Suddenly, he felt an unusual aura in the air and he quickly jumped up vigilantly. Standing on the huge green rock, Ao Jia observed the surroundings. That's strange. She had clearly felt danger just now, but why couldn't she find it now? Just as Ao Jia was puzzled, the ground shook. Then, he staggered and fell from the green rock. After he stood up, he realized that the green rock was alive. Fuck. Even stones were unreliable these days. Ao Jia's eyes widened as he looked at the stone that was moving slightly. He was thinking, what is this thing? It was only when a head popped out from under the rock that Ao Jia confirmed that it was a giant turtle. Although the giant tortoise was 2 meters tall and only 10 meters in diameter, Ao Jia believed that this was not the giant tortoise's maximum state. As soon as he thought of this, he saw the giant tortoise suddenly grow to more than 10 meters in height and 100 meters in diameter. It was like a mountain and looked down at Ao Jia. Ao Jia was not to be outdone either. He transformed into his true form and flew into the air, staring at the giant turtle. The eagle and the turtle stared at each other for a long time, and finally, the giant turtle opened its mouth. Little guy, you've been lying on my body for so long and you haven't paid. The giant turtle asked Ao Jia for money. Even if Ao Jia was calm, he could not accept it. Black lines were hanging on his forehead as he suppressed his anger and said, "Who are you calling a little fellow? You've lived longer than me." He just didn't mention money. Haven't you heard of the 1,000-year turtle? I've grown so big, I've definitely lived longer than you. The giant turtle said matter-of-factly as it stared at Ao Jia with its huge eyes. Ao Jia was a little scared. That might not be the case. Ao Jia said coldly. It doesn't matter if you believe it or not, just pay the fee for lying on my body. The giant turtle smiled as if it was afraid that Ao Jia would not give it money. When Ao Jia heard this, he was so depressed that he almost vomited blood. What the hell was this place? Why are there all kinds of oddball beasts? However, Ao Jia did not want to be robbed by a turtle, so he said directly, I don't have any money, but I'm dead. Yo! You want to play dirty? Hee hee. I'm not afraid of being played by others. If you don't pay me the money I want, then don't even think about leaving this place. Stay here with me. I'm very lonely, and I really need someone to chat with me. The huge turtle slowly said. I also won't stay here to accompany you. Aogia said angrily. Oh, really? Little guy, it seems that you won't shed tears until you see the coffin. I didn't want to use force, but you forced me to. The giant turtle sighed and looked at Aogia helplessly. The expression on its face was very conflicted, as if it was forced to do so. When Aogia heard the giant tortoise's words, he knew that a fight was about to begin. However, after so many rounds, he did not mind fighting a few more. Hence, as soon as the giant tortoise finished speaking, Aogia immediately launched his attack. Several wind blades that exuded a violent aura flew straight at the giant turtle's head. When the giant turtle saw that it was in danger, it hurriedly retracted its head and hid in its shell. The wind blades all hit the giant turtle's thick shell, but not even a scratch was left. Upon seeing this, Aogia's anger grew. However, he knew very well that the defense of turtles was extremely strong, and this giant turtle's strength was not inferior to his. Thus, it would not be possible to defeat this giant turtle in a short time. With anger, Aogia fired a few more wind blades, all of which hit the turtle's shell. The giant turtle did not even reveal its head. In his anger, Aogia gave up on his attack and planned to leave. He could not waste his time on a turtle. The giant tortoise, who saw through Aogia's thoughts, stretched out its head slowly and reminded him with a smile, "Little guy, you haven't paid. You can't leave yet." When Aogia heard this, he was furious. Then, he said to the giant turtle, "You cowardly turtle. What kind of skill is hiding in the shell? Do you dare to fight me with real weapons? Don't hide." The giant turtle was not angry when it heard what Aogia said. It was still smiling and said, "I didn't dodge. I'm on the defense. Defend your head." Aogia was furious. He was too lazy to argue with a turtle. He turned around and left. This time, the giant turtle did not stop him. However, after taking a few steps, he suddenly realized that he could not leave this place. There was a colorless film in front of him that blocked his way. Aogia tried to attack but realized that the thin membrane did not move at all. "You did it." Aogia turned around and looked at the giant tortoise. He said with certainty. "Hee. I told you, you can't leave without paying." The giant tortoise laughed smugly while Aogia was furious. Just like that, the eagle and the turtle were in a stalemate. The giant turtle did not fight with Aogia. If Aogia attacked, it would hide its head in its shell. When it stopped fighting, it would stick its head out and chat with Aogia happily. Of course, most of the time, it was the giant turtle talking to itself, but Aogia did not want to bother with it at all. "Little guy, it's good that you're here with me. Those beasts won't have the chance to find trouble with you again. It's safe and not tiring. Right?" The giant tortoise repeated the same words for more than 100 times, and Aogia's ears were getting calluses from hearing it. In the end, Aogia could not take it anymore and replied angrily, "Good my ass." Trapped by these defensive giant turtles, Aogia was so depressed that he was about to hit a wall. At this moment, he would rather stay outside and fight with the beasts that came to find trouble than stay with this talkative turtle. If this continued, he would go crazy. Ah! 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 The villain in Aogia's heart was going crazy. When would this annoying giant turtle let him go? At the thought of this, Aogia asked tentatively, "Will you let me go if I pay you?" It was originally. The huge turtle opened its eyes slightly and said in a faint voice. It was supposed to be. Aogia was so angry that he stopped breathing and almost fainted. The giant turtle saw how excited Aogia was and explained, "If you had paid me in the beginning, I might have let you go. But after we've been together for so long, I can't bear to let you leave. It's very dangerous outside. If you stay here and have nothing to do, you can chat with me. We can keep each other company." Isn't life like this beautiful? Chapter 2097, The Black Tortoise, 1, Aog's mouth twitched as he listened to the giant turtle planning its beautiful future. He did not want to hear this nonsense. He wanted to cut this old turtle into pieces. It was too talkative. The old turtle glanced at the impatient Aog but did not care. It continued to talk about its ideas. When it got excited, it even stretched out its limbs and gestured on the ground. A day and a night passed and Aog was drowsy. Finally, Aog could not take it anymore and fell asleep. The old turtle saw this and pulled Aog onto its back. As if he was coaxing a child, he carried Aog on his back and started to turn in circles on the ground. However, Aog was not aware of the situation. Otherwise, he would be depressed. No one would have thought that they would still be treated like a child at their age. However, they had to admit that after being with the turtle, Aog's divine power recovered very quickly. He did not even use up any of his divine power. However, for some reason, after being idle for a long time, he actually missed the endless battles from before. Although such a high-intensity battle would exhaust them, it was undeniable that such a battle could stimulate their potential. Perhaps they might not be used to it at the beginning, but after adapting, it would still be very beneficial to them. With this thought in mind, Aog's desire to escape from Old Tortoise's control became stronger. After being trapped by the old turtle for a long time, Aog had changed his usual dull mood and started to talk to the old turtle. He was trying to test when the old turtle would let him go. However, the old turtle was very cunning. No matter how Aog tried to change the topic to leave, the old turtle did not fall for it. This fact had thoroughly dealt a blow to Aog. He did not expect that the seemingly simple-minded old tortoise was actually like an old fox. What should he do? Aog was depressed. The hospitable old turtle was worried when it saw that Aog was getting more and more listless. Little guy, what's wrong with you? Was it cooked? In order to liven up the atmosphere, Old Tortoise deliberately made a joke. You're the one who's been cooked. Your entire family has been cooked. Upon hearing this, Aog was furious. Ah! Looking at Aog's reaction, the old turtle was a little dumbfounded. It was just joking. Why was the little guy so excited? Little fellow, could it be that you've really been cooked by someone? The old turtle guessed with a touch of sympathy in its eyes. How is that possible? Aog roared. Then what are you so excited about? I was just joking with you. The old turtle said, feeling wronged. Can jokes be made in such a way? In fact, even though he had never been cooked, the elders in the clan had always threatened him with this matter when he was young because he had played too badly. As time went by, this matter had caused a serious trauma in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have reacted so strongly. I was wrong. Old Tortoise apologized sincerely and said, Little guy, you won't be angry with me, right? Humph. If you don't want me to be angry, just let me go. After hearing Old Tortoise's words, Aog had an idea. This was a good opportunity and he had to seize it. After hearing Aog's request, the old turtle's heart began to struggle. Its face also showed a look of hesitation. After a long while, the old turtle seemed to have made an important decision and said reluctantly, Ai. All right. As long as you're not angry, I'll let you go. When Aog heard this, his face immediately revealed a look of joy, but it was only for a moment. Then, he confirmed with some worry, You're serious? You're not allowed to lie to me. I never lie. The old turtle promised, because it was not lying to people, hee. Aog did not understand the deep meaning behind Old Turtle's words. At this time, his heart was filled with joy and he could not care about anything else. That's good, quickly let me go. Aog said impatiently. After he got out, he had to vent all his grievances. Otherwise, he would die of suffocation. Let's go. Little brat. The turtle nodded reluctantly. Then, it waved its fat claws. Aojia could clearly feel that the transparent film that was blocking him disappeared. As soon as the thin film disappeared, Aojia was like a bird that was released from its cage. He transformed back into his original form and flew excitedly into the sky. He flew a few rounds in the sky and let out a few loud roars before he transformed back into his human form and landed on the ground. The feeling of being released was great. After doing all this, Aojia waved goodbye to Old Tortoise and left with big strides. However, he had only taken 2 steps when he felt that something was wrong. It was as if something was following him. When he walked, the other party walked. When he stopped, the other party stopped as well. Suddenly, Aojia turned around and met a pair of warm and large eyes. Aojia was so scared that he took a few steps back. Then, he looked at the other person in disbelief. Why are you following me? Aojia's heart was palpitating. Was this old turtle planning to leave with him? Woo! He wasn't that little girl Shuai. When did he become so popular with Beastie? The old turtle nodded and said shyly, I can't bear to part with you, little fellow, so I've decided to leave with you. Although I can't bear to leave this place, you're more important. Hearing this, Aojia was not happy at all. He had always wanted to get rid of this old turtle, but now, not only did he not get rid of this guy, but he even let it stick to him. What the hell was this? He really wanted to cry. After a long while, Aojia said tearlessly, Old senior, it's not suitable for us to be together. You'd better not pester me. Go and find someone who's willing to accompany you. I'm begging you. But I'm only interested in you. The old turtle blinked its watery eyes and said as if it had been wronged. I'm not interested in you. Aojia almost knelt down in front of the turtle. He didn't know what the turtle saw in him. How did she get entangled with him? Moreover, he was not a human, so he could not let the old turtle recognize him as its master. He also did not know how to take care of people. He was a typical example of one person eating his fill, but the whole family was not hungry. Moreover, he was still freeloading at Shuai's place. If he brought another turtle with him, the consequences would be unimaginable if Shuai got angry and kicked him out as well. It doesn't matter. I believe that as time passes, we will definitely fall in love with each other. The old turtle said indifferently, and a faint smile was revealed in its huge eyes. Aojia sighed again and again. He was helpless and did not know what to do with this stubborn old turtle. It could be said that he had never encountered such a thing in all his life. At this moment, a thought suddenly flashed through his mind. Then, he asked tentatively, I know this is Azure's territory. If I'm not wrong, you're all Azure's illusions, right? If that's the case, it seems like you can't follow me. Chapter 2098, The Black Tortoise, 2, Those little guys are the illusions of the master of this place, but I'm not. I'm a beastie like you, but I've been living here since I was a child. I was adopted by the owner of this place. Aojia's words made the old turtle smile calmly. It had finally met a living, real beastie. It could not let this little guy go. Therefore, it was determined to stick to him. Hee hee. If you were adopted by Azure, I wouldn't dare to let you follow me. Aojia pretended to be in a difficult position. It doesn't matter. I'm free. Although the owner of this place has provided me with a place to recuperate, he doesn't care who I follow. I'm still free. The old turtle promised very seriously. But I'm not free. I'm following a little girl now and can be considered his subordinate. So, I really can't bring you along. Aojia brought out Leng Ruoxue. Then I'll also be that little girl's subordinate. I believe that with my strength, she will definitely not refuse. The old turtle said indifferently. Ugh. Upon seeing this, Aojia was at his wit's end. He had said what he needed to say and he really could not think of a better excuse. He had no choice but to let the old turtle follow him. Not long after the depressed Aojia left, he was attacked by the first wave of beasts. The beasts who attacked him actually knew the old turtle and greeted it first. The old turtle also chatted with them happily for a while before the beasts started to attack Aojie. Seeing this, Aojie was speechless. However, he was still very grateful to the beasts that attacked him. He vented his frustration on the unlucky beasts while Old Tortoise found a safe place to watch the show. He dealt with the beasts that attacked him cleanly and glanced at the old turtle who was drowsy from watching the show. Aojie could not help but twitch his mouth. This old turtle was too casual. Although he had never expected the turtle to help him when he was attacked by beasts, did it have to act so leisurely? He was really envious and jealous. At this moment, the old turtle closed its eyes and said, "It's all settled." Hee hee. That's pretty fast. Let's continue our journey. After saying that, the old turtle took the lead and left. Aojie, who was helpless, could only follow behind. Along the way, Aojie encountered more and more beast attacks. However, not only did the old turtle not help him, but it even started to despise him. "Little brat, your speed in battle is not good enough. It's too slow," the old turtle said as he watched the battle. Aojie was so angry that his anger rose to the top of his head. Finally, he could not bear it anymore and shouted, "Why don't you try? Let me see your combat speed." "How can we do that? This is a special training arranged by Senior Tsang for you. Besides, I don't like fighting either, so such a rough thing as fighting should be done by you male beasts." The old turtle shook its head and said. Aojie was so angry at Old Tortoise's words that he was speechless. "Wait. A male beast? Don't tell me that this turtle is a female. You're a female?" Aojie's eyes widened as he asked. "Yes, you just realized it. Why are you so stupid?" The old turtle was a little dissatisfied. It thought that the little guy had already known. All right. He admitted that he was stupid, Aojie thought to himself. However, he could not be blamed for this. Beasts like turtles were not common in the immortal realm and the characteristics of the mother beast were not obvious. How could he recognize it? Seeing Aojie's depression, Old Turtle smiled and patted Aojie's shoulder. "Little guy, let's go." Just like that, the man and turtle continued to move forward. Time passed. Len Ruoxue and the rest had stayed here for so long that they could no longer tell whether it was morning or night. The sky was getting darker and there was not much difference between day and night. In fact, on cloudy days, it was as dark as night. Hence, the longer they stayed, the more they did not care whether it was day or night. The more they fought, the less time they had to worry about anything else. Every second, their lives were filled to the brim. The battle had triggered all the killing intent in their bodies. At the same time, they were more focused. After all, if they were not careful, they could be in danger of dying. There was a time when Cheng Wu was too tired and wanted to lie on the ground and play dead because he had fought too many times. After all, he had a glimmer of hope in his heart. He knew that this was just a special training that Tsang had given them. Tsang probably wouldn't put their lives in danger for the sake of his miss. It was because of this thought that he played dead. However, when he laid on the ground without moving, the beastie that had been besieging him did not stop their attacks. Instead, they launched even more fierce attacks. This fact scared him so much that he broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly got up from the ground and threw himself back into the battle. From then on, he did not dare to have any thoughts of being lucky. He could also see that Senior Tsang didn't care about their lives at all. Perhaps this was the true meaning of the special training. The change in mindset and the abandonment of luck in his heart had allowed Cheng Wu's state of mind to reach a new level. His potential had also been truly stimulated. Furthermore, the current him was like a sword that had just been unsheathed, sharp yet reserved. Not only Cheng Wu, but the others also gained a lot. Their endurance and battle awareness had all been raised to a new level. The speed at which they absorbed spiritual qi, their mental strength, and their state of mind had also improved at a godly speed. However, Their minds were all focused on the battle, so they had not noticed the huge change in themselves. At this moment, the improvement in their mental state made them not feel tired from the frequent battles. In fact, they were filled with hot blood. Uncle Long felt as if he had returned to the days when he fought side by side with his companions. In the past, he had also been so passionate and had fought without caring about anything. He had also thirsted for victory. Now, he was reliving everything. He was extremely excited. However, to Uncle Long, the master of the Ning family, and Ao Jia, they were already reverent god-level cultivators. Their chances of advancing were almost zero. However, they were still very happy that their state of mind and strength had improved. By the time they realized this, they had already left the training ground. Feeling that they had been moved again, the three of them were not used to it at first. After a short rest, the three looked at Sung and asked in unison, "How did we leave that place?" "The special training is over." "Yes, you can come out now." "Why? Have you not stayed long enough?" Azure nodded, but after seeing the three's expressions, he couldn't help but tease them. "I've had enough." Although life there was exciting, their lives could be in danger at any time. The more time passed, the stronger the opponents Tsung arranged for them became. There were several times when they almost lost their lives. Thinking of those dangerous moments, they still broke out in cold sweat. Therefore, if they could leave the special training place, they really didn't want to stay. Chapter 2099, The Black Tortoise, 3. When Sung heard this, he laughed out loud and pointed at the screen. "You guys can come out now, but they're still suffering inside." "Ah. When will they come out?" Looking at Leng Ruoxue and the rest on the screen, their dirty appearance, and comparing it to their own sorry state, they felt the same way. Sob. "It's not easy for everyone. When will they be able to come out?" Azure said indifferently. "Wouldn't that take a long time?" Ao Jia's sympathy for Leng Ruoxue and the rest was like a torrential river, endless. Furthermore, after he came out, he did not see the old turtle. Instantly, he was in a good mood. He couldn't help but think that he could finally get rid of that old turtle who liked to watch the fun. At that moment, a voice came from behind Ao Jia, "Little guy, I'm here." When Ao Jia heard this familiar voice, he started to break out in cold sweat. It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Oh my god. Why can't you hear my inner voice? Let this old turtle go back to where it came from. He prayed sincerely. However, the heavens ignored his pleas. The old turtle walked behind him and patted Ao Jia's shoulder with its huge claws as if it was comforting him. Then, the turtle introduced itself to Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family. "Hello, you're friends with this little guy, right?" "I'm Xian, you can call me Aunt Xian." "Aunt Xian." Hearing the old turtle's words, Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family were speechless. This old turtle actually asked them to call it Aunt Xian. This. In the blink of an eye, they had another senior in the house, and this senior was obviously provoked by Ao Jia. In an instant, 2 icy daggers were shot at Ao Jia. Ao Jia was so scared that his heart was trembling. He did not dare to turn around because he could foresee how angry Uncle Long and the master of the Ning family would be. However, there were people in this world who liked to take pleasure in others' misfortune. After hearing Xian's words, Azure laughed happily. It's good to call her Aunt Xian." "Good, my ass." The three of them couldn't help but curse in their hearts. Their expressions were extremely ugly, and they instantly turned ashen. At this time, the evildoer, who had been silent for a moment, opened his mouth and said, "You are the Black Tortoise?" "Yes." The Black Tortoise nodded obediently and lowered its head, not daring to look at the evildoer. Although this handsome man did not seem to be very powerful, he gave it great pressure. Its little heart was trembling all the time. If it had not put its 4 limbs into the turtle shell, it would have trembled. Azure was very clear about the Black Tortoise's fear. He looked at the demon with dissatisfaction and said, "Why did you scare it? It's very timid." "Timid?" The demon raised his eyebrows and looked at Sung doubtfully. Then, he looked directly at the black tortoise, which made the black tortoise feel uncomfortable and his little heart trembled even more. Woo, this is fatal. Who was this person? Why did he give her such a similar feeling to Master Yu? However, he was even more terrifying than Master Yu. Oh. Or it could also be said that the two gave it different feelings. However, it still felt fear. Thinking of this, the black tortoise shrank its head and lowered its sense of existence in a self-deceiving way. The evildoer could not help but chuckle when he saw it. Hee hee. This little fellow is quite interesting. It should be the only mystic turtle in the divine realm, right? The demon said with certainty. Yes, I am. Azure nodded. This black tortoise was still an egg when it was discovered, and it was also the one who hatched this little fellow. Moreover, a long time ago, the Black Turtle clan was well known in the divine realm. Although they were not among the 4 great king divine beasts, they were once as famous as the 4 great king divine beasts. Compared to the fighting power of the 4 great king divine beasts, the Black Turtle clan was most famous for their defensive ability. However, 1,000,000 years ago, the Black Turtle clan suddenly went extinct for unknown reasons. This was an unsolved case in the divine realm. Even the Divine Master could not find out the reason behind the Black Turtle clan's extinction. And this little turtle was kept in the space it had created. When Uncle Long and the other 2 heard that the turtle in front of them was the Black Turtle, they took a few more glances at it. After all, the Black Turtle clan was once as famous as the 4 great king divine beasts in the divine world. However, they had never seen the real Black Turtle, because when they heard of the glorious deeds of the Black Turtle clan, they had already become a legend in the divine world. Now that they suddenly saw a living Black Turtle, they were even more surprised. After knowing that this turtle was the Black Turtle, they were relieved that the Black Turtle called himself an elder. Who asked this turtle to be so much older than them? However, if the demon didn't call this black tortoise a little fellow, they would be even happier. But now, they had the upper hand. After living for so many years, his seniority was getting lower and lower. No one could accept this, right? As far as the eye could see, groups of elders were calling them little guys when they met. This made them, who had always felt that their seniority was very high, really unable to accept it. However, the divine world had always respected the strong. Thus, although they could not say it out loud, they could still accept it in their hearts. At this moment, Sung felt something strange. He glanced at the screen and said in surprise, "There's a little fellow who's about to advance." Upon hearing this, Uncle Long and the others quickly turned to look at the light screen. The person who was about to advance was the first elder, who was covered in wounds and tattered. On the screen, the Grand Elder was lying on the ground. His body was emitting a faint white light, and his face was filled with pain. Then, the Grand Elder's body exploded with a 7-colored light, and the laws of heaven and earth descended. Seeing all this, the master of the Ning family was so excited that he was overjoyed. He had known the Great Elder for many years, and their relationship was even closer than family. He knew that the Great Elder had been stuck at the Divine Emperor level for a long time. Now, that old thing was finally going to advance to the Reverend God level. He was sincerely happy for the Great Elder. He could even feel the nervousness in his heart. His eyes were fixed on the light screen without blinking, afraid that the First Elder would act strangely. It was not until the law of heaven and earth disappeared that the master of the Ning family could finally put down his worries. The reason why he was so worried was because the Reverend God level was different from the previous levels. Although the laws of heaven and earth would descend as usual, the Reverend God level contained a soul attack. If one was not careful, they could go berserk and form an inner demon. As a result, being able to become a Reverend God was the greatest test for a divine emperor. Since ancient times, many divine emperors had died while trying to break through. Otherwise, there wouldn't be only a few hundred Reverend God level cultivators in the God realm. Seeing that the Great Elder had completed his advancement, Sung directly moved the Great Elder out. When the great elder came out and saw the master of the Ning family and the others, he immediately burst into tears and threw himself into the arms of the master of the Ning family, as if he had seen a long-lost family member, and kept sobbing. Seeing this, the Ning family master and the others were all speechless. Ugh! What kind of situation was this? Do you have to be so excited? However, the master of the Ning family could understand the great elder and patted his back to comfort him. The master of the Ning family smiled and said, "Old man, congratulations. Hee hee. I can't believe that I'll become a reverent god one day." When the great elder realized what embarrassing thing he had done, he immediately jumped out of his old friend's arms, his face full of embarrassment. However, he was really too excited, because he had almost died before advancing. Originally, he had been stuck at the Divine Emperor level for many years and had not felt the barrier to breaking through. After Tsang's special training, he had experienced many life and death trials. Before breaking through, he had been attacked by his opponents until he was on the verge of death. He had never expected that he, who had thought he would die, would actually break through at the last moment. This fact made him both surprised and happy. Even now, he still felt that it was a bit of a fantasy. However, he knew that this was all thanks to Tsang's special training. Tsang had made him feel the threat of death, which had greatly stimulated his Buddha's potential. He had never felt so close to death before. This feeling was too unforgettable, but he believed that no one would want to experience this feeling again, and he didn't want to. Then, he gratefully turned his gaze to Tsang and said, "Tsang, thank you for your special training. No need to thank me. However, your strength is really too low. You actually took so long to beat a few beastie." AI. Blue sighed, clearly dissatisfied with the Grand Elder's performance. When the Grand Elder heard Blue's words, he was even more embarrassed, not knowing what to say. In reality, he wasn't very good at fighting, especially in group battles. If it wasn't for Shuai'er's life flame cheating, his battle wouldn't have caught Blue's eyes. However, no matter what, a rank advancement is something worth celebrating. Tsang continued, finally saying some words of encouragement. At this time, Tsang exclaimed, There's another little fellow who's about to advance." He exclaimed in surprise. Chapter 2100, The Deceptive Giant, 1. This time, the person who was going to advance was Leng Ruhan. Tsang nodded in satisfaction when he saw this. He thought to himself, Nyo's brother's aptitude is not bad. Maybe I can give him more opportunities to train. With this thought in mind, he began to arrange Leng Ruhan's future training in his heart. However, it was fortunate that Leng Ruhan was still unaware of this. Otherwise, he would be depressed. On the screen, Leng Ruhan's speed of advancement was very fast. After about 15 minutes, he had officially advanced to the Divine Emperor realm. However, Leng Ruhan, who had advanced, was clearly at a loss. She had not expected that she would suddenly advance. After all, this was too unexpected for him. Before the special training, he had never thought that he would be able to advance to the Divine Sovereign realm so quickly. Just like the others, he had been tormented enough and almost lost his life several times. However, his luck was not bad. He was always able to turn danger into safety at the most critical moment. As for his advancement this time, he was also in the middle of a battle. Therefore, he was not mentally prepared at all. Everything seemed to have come naturally and smoothly. After the momentary days of advancing, he suddenly came to his senses. At this moment, his opponent was also a little dumbfounded when he saw his sudden advancement. Leng Ruhan saw this and naturally did not plan to let go of this rare opportunity. After a few powerful attacks, her opponent was turned into ashes. Seeing this, Uncle Long smiled and said to Azure, "Senior Tsang, can Ruhan this brat also come out?" "Yes." Tsang nodded, then moved Leng Ruhan to the control room. When Uncle Long and the others saw Leng Ruhan coming out, they quickly congratulated him. Leng Ruhan was also very excited to see them. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he started to worry about his grandfather and the others who had yet to come out. Sensing Leng Ruhan's thoughts, Zhang Wei grinned and said, "Little brat, you don't have to worry about them. They will come out sooner or later. I've already arranged the next training for you, so you have to work hard. There's more." Hearing this, Leng Ruhan frowned and laughed bitterly in his heart. So Zhang had his eyes on him. He actually arranged training for him again. He had wanted to spend more time with Shuer, grandfather, and the others, but it seemed like he had no time again. When Uncle Long and the others heard Zhang's words, their hearts skipped a beat. Were they going to continue training? At this moment, Zhang, who also knew what Uncle Long and the others were thinking, smiled and said to them, "Little guy, don't be afraid. I won't arrange for you to train together." Hearing Zhang's words, Uncle Long and the rest heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, they also sympathized with Leng Ruhan. What a pitiful little fellow. Let's continue training. Receiving the sympathetic gazes from Uncle Long and the others, Leng Ruhan felt even more depressed. Then, she could not help but ask, "Can I not participate in any training for the time being?" "No," Azure said without any room for discussion. "But I want to spend more time with my family," Leng Ruhan said honestly. "Don't worry, you'll have plenty of time to spend with your family in the future. As for the current stage, you should still focus on cultivation. The reason why I want to train you is for your own good. After all, you're still too weak," Azure said with a heavy tone. "All right then," Leng Ruhan replied helplessly. The gloominess in her heart was also increasing endlessly. He had just advanced one rank and his excitement had not completely faded. However, he was still being said that his strength was too low by Zhang. Sob. This fact had dealt him a blow. However, he had a good mental fortitude and soon adjusted his mentality. Then, like Genius and the others, he turned his eyes to the light screen. After an unknown period of time, Qing Wu, Leng Qingtian, and the others had completed their advancement in rank. They were moved out by Zhang. Although they all looked rather disheveled, the joy of advancing still hung on their faces. When Leng Ruhan saw their excited expressions, she could not bear to tell them that they still had to continue with their training. But he didn't say it, and he wouldn't say it without waiting for others. Zhang took advantage of their happiness to tell them directly and arranged other training for them. When Leng Qingtian and the others heard this, they were instantly dumbfounded. Uncle Long, the master of the Ning family, first elder, and Ao Jia looked at them with sympathy, not knowing how to comfort them. After a long while, Chen Wukai stuttered in disbelief, You still need to train." "Yes." Zhang nodded with certainty, his dark eyes still filled with disdain as he continued, "Your current strength is too low, you must train well, and I will definitely train you to become strong fighters like the war gods. Good luck, God of War." Qing Wu and the rest wanted to cry but had no tears. Could they say that they did not want to become war gods? However, it didn't seem to be of much use. Zhang would never accept it. Sob. Could it be that they could only accept their fate? Thinking about it, they were really unwilling. However, thinking about how overbearing Zhang was, they were all a little afraid. Hence, in the end, no one said anything to object. Following that, Leng Qingtian took the initiative to change the topic and asked, "Why hasn't Shuer come out yet?" "Niu is still early. The amount of spiritual energy she needs is several times more than you all, so she won't be able to come out for a while. And since you've come out, then have a good rest and continue your training," Azure said after some thought. "Can't we continue training after Shuer comes out?" Leng Qingtian said pitifully. He had not seen his precious granddaughter for a long time. He missed her so much. Time is money. Niu's grandfather. "I'm doing this for your own good. There's still a long way to go," Azure helplessly advised. "All right then." Leng Qingtian was helpless as well. However, Zhang's words were not without reason. Soon after, Leng Qingtian and the others were teleported out of the god-protecting pagoda. When they returned to the courtyard, Ling Qingtian and the others saw Bing Yao, who was looking at Yuchuan. He was running around in circles in the garden like a headless fly. When he saw them, he immediately ran over and asked, "Where did you guys go? Where's Shuer?" Bing Yao was depressed. Song took everyone in the garden, leaving only him. This fact almost drove him crazy. Moreover, no matter how loudly he shouted, Sung, that bad guy, pretended not to hear him and didn't appear at all. When he thought of this, he was so depressed that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. "We were taken into the God Protection Tower by Azure for special training before we came out. Azure said we have to continue training and let us out to rest." Ling Qingtian explained calmly. "Oh." Bing Yao nodded, then widened his eyes. "You've all advanced?" "I only advanced 1 rank. Cheng Wu said gloomily. "1 rank is too little." Bing Yao's eyes widened in anger. These guys really didn't know how lucky they were. It was extremely difficult for others to advance in rank, especially after reaching the God King stage. In order to continue advancing to the God Emperor or Reverent God stage, other than opportunities, all kinds of heavenly resources were indispensable. However, with Shuer and Sung's help, these fellows' advancement speed was like a rocket. If this was known by others, wouldn't they die of envy and jealousy? Chapter 2101, The Deceptive Giant, 2, Senior Azure said that our strength is still too low. Cheng Wu said in a small voice. He was actually very satisfied, but Senior Tsang was not. Therefore, they had to continue to work hard. Ah! That pervert! In its eyes, there's no one who's strong. Bing Yao's mouth twitched, and he was a little speechless. Cheng Wu and the others didn't know how to respond to this because they knew that Senior Tsang would definitely hear them. Thus, they could only pretend to be silent. "Sir Bing Yao, well, go back to our room to rest." After a long while, Cheng Wu continued to speak. Then, everyone immediately left the garden. In the blink of an eye, Bing Yao was the only one left in the huge garden. Seeing them run faster than rabbits, Bing Yao became even more depressed. He kept thinking in his heart, did he say something wrong? Why did these people seem to be afraid? How could they not be afraid? Bing Yao was talking about Sung. Naturally, he couldn't hide the fact that he had said perverted Sung. However, Sung didn't have the time to care about Bing Yao. All of its attention was on Leng Ruoxue. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue was still in the space created by Tsang, fighting with the beasts. However, because of the help of her life flame, those beasts did not pose any threat to her at all. But after staying here for a long time, she would get tired of it. And now, she was starting to feel a little frustrated. With her annoyance, the speed of the beasts' deaths became even faster. However, after knowing that those beasts could resurrect after dying, she naturally became unscrupulous when she vented her anger. Leng Ruoxue had killed hordes and hordes of beasts with almost no repetition of the same divine skill. After repeated use, she had mastered the divine skills to the point of perfection. In fact, she had even created a few divine skills of her own. However, the divine skills that she had created all required the support of a large amount of divine power. Hence, other than her, no one else could use them. However, the power of those divine skills was absolutely extraordinary, especially in group attacks. Almost all of them were fatal. One of her favorite skills was named Myriad Phoenix Dance. From the name, it was obvious that it was a divine skill with a fire attribute. The most unique feature of this divine skill was that it was similar to a meteor shower. However, this divine skill released phoenixes. Each phoenix was only the size of a baby's palm, and their bodies were burning with 7 colored flames. They were exceptionally beautiful. After using this godly skill many times, she had become very familiar with it. The beasts here had all been attacked by tens of thousands of dancing phoenix. In the end, the time that the beasts could appear in front of Leng Ruoxue grew longer and longer. In the past, a few waves of beasts could appear in a day. But now, there were times when not a single group of beasts would attack her. This fact left Leng Ruoxue at a loss of whether to laugh or cry. However, she knew that she couldn't blame the beasts. The main reason was that they were afraid of her. It was her fault for killing them whenever she was irritated, and the speed at which those beasts were resurrected clearly could not keep up with the speed at which they were killed. In the long run, she had actually fallen into a situation where she had no beasts to kill. This fact made Uncle Long and the others feel extremely helpless. The fact that Leng Ruoxue was a freak was etched even deeper into their hearts. Especially the Great Elder, as long as he thought of the helplessness and restraint he had when he killed the beasts, and compared it to Shuai'er's ease, he had the urge to cry. Woo! It was really infuriating to compare. In the control room, Uncle Long hesitated for a long time before he finally couldn't help but ask, Senior Tsang, is that last Shuai'er going to continue staying inside like this? He felt that Shuai'er could come out now. Even Beastie did not dare to appear in front of her, so there was no point for her to continue staying there. I've said it before, you can't come out without breaking through. Azure said somewhat stubbornly. Your useless subordinates don't even dare to show their faces, what's the point of Shuai'er still staying there? Evildoer sneered at Tsang's words. From his point of view, this bastard Tsang wanted to separate him and Shuai'er, that's why he came up with the special training. Now, the special training was no longer meaningful to Shuai'er, but this bastard still refused to let her out. This was preposterous. They don't dare to show their faces, but don't you still have me? Azure said with a smile. When the demon heard this, he was shocked. He quickly squinted his eyes and asked, what do you mean by that? Damn it. It couldn't be what he was thinking, right? Hee. It's the literal meaning. Azure laughed complacently before disappearing. When they saw him again, he was already on the screen. After that, they watched as Tsang Huan turned into a small snow-white rabbit and bounced towards Leng Ruoxue's direction. Instantly, everyone was speechless, and the demon's face gradually darkened. Tsang arrived in front of Leng Ruoxue very quickly and sat down. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue was preparing dinner for herself. When she saw the rabbit in front of her, she was stunned for a moment before saying, "You're offering yourself to me for dinner?" "No." Tsang shook his head, his nose couldn't help but take in a breath of the delicious food floating out of the pot. Could it be that he's here to pick up food? Leng Ruoxue was speechless. She could not understand why a little beast that she had conjured would want to eat. The wolf that he had met the first time was a foodie, and this rabbit seemed to be one too. Hee. You're right. Azure laughed. You are. Tsang. Leng Ruoxue probed when she heard his tone. How did you know? Azure was a bit surprised. He didn't think that Nyo would still recognize him even after he turned into a rabbit. This wasn't easy to handle. However, how did Nyo recognize it? One had to know that it had already concealed its aura. Your tone of voice hasn't changed. Leng Ruoxue's forehead was full of black lines. She didn't know what Tsang wanted to do by turning into a rabbit and running in front of her. He couldn't be here to play hide-and-seek with her, right? Oh. Blue was a little depressed when he heard this. He didn't expect that his tone would expose him. But it didn't matter. Since he had been exposed, he would think of other ways. Tsang, why did you come in? Leng Ruoxue continued to ask. Hee. I originally came in to accompany you in your special training, but Nyo's flames are too terrifying, even the beastie I conjured is afraid. However, since you've recognized me, I can't be your sparring partner anymore. Azure spread out his little claws and said helplessly. What else do you plan to do? Leng Ruoxue asked out of curiosity. She had been idle for at least 3 days, right? Not a single beastie came to find trouble with her. This fact made her rather speechless, and even made her often wonder if she was really that terrifying. I'm going to upgrade your special training. To tell the truth, this was also a last-minute decision. How do I upgrade it? Leng Ruoxue was very surprised. Was Tsang planning to reveal his trump card? Chapter 2102, The Deceptive Giant, 3, Hee. You'll know after I finish this meal. Cold stared at the fresh food. Ah. Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue felt even more helpless. However, she still took the initiative to hand the dishes to that little foodie, Tsang. Tsang also ate without any reservations. After eating and drinking to its heart's content, Tsang laid in Leng Ruoxue's arms with its limbs spread wide open. It burped comfortably and Leng Ruoxue was at a loss for words when she saw its current state. As for evildoer who could see Tsang's every move through the light screen, he was so angry that his face turned black and dark clouds gathered. The cold air on his body could instantly freeze people into ice sculptures. Uncle Long and the others, who felt the chill, couldn't help but keep a safe distance from him so that they wouldn't be affected. When Dang Tsang had rested enough, he had an idea and left with Leng Ruoxue. Moments later, Leng Ruoxue moved to another location. This time, she was no longer in the forest. She had arrived at a room. That room was like a secret chamber. There was no wind on all four sides. There were no decorations in the room or on the walls. It looked rather simple. However, Leng Ruoxue did not think that this room would be as ordinary as it looked. She was very clear that Tsang would not bring her to a place where she was not of much use. Where is this place? Leng Ruoxue glanced at Tsang and asked calmly. This is the training room. Azure laughed. What trial? Leng Ruoxue's curiosity was piqued. Anything is fine. Girl, you can continue your special training here from now on. The opponents here are very strong. Azure said with a mysterious expression. Very strong? How strong are they? Leng Ruoxue didn't understand. The opponents in the forest she was in previously weren't weak either, right? She often encountered godly venerable rank beasts. However, when Tsang heard Leng Ruoxue's question, he only smiled and didn't reply. Then, he snuggled into Leng Ruoxue's arms before leaving reluctantly. After Tsang left, she was the only one left in the empty room. Leng Ruoxue stood there in boredom, but her heart was thinking about what would be here. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue felt a distortion in space not far away from her. She looked up and saw a giant with yellow skin that was tens of meters tall appear in front of her. Not only was this giant tall and big, but his body was also very strong. His waist alone could fit at least 5 Leng Ruoxues. His eyes were even bigger than copper bells. However, the giant was expressionless as he crossed his arms and looked down at Leng Ruoxue. As for the giant's strength, it was only at the level of a god king. After Leng Ruoxue observed for a while, the questions in her heart grew. The giant's strength left her even more puzzled. Azure knew how powerful her flames were, so why did she create someone with the same strength as her? She didn't quite understand Tsang's meaning. Just as Leng Ruoxue was at a loss, the giant finally spoke, "He'll be your sparring partner from now on. You have to defeat me in order to have the chance to challenge higher-level trials." I know. A long sword appeared in her hand. The sword was emitting a frightful cold chi. When the giant saw this, he did not even bat an eyelid. In that instant, Leng Ruoxue made her move. A loud and clear phoenix cry suddenly rang out. The sword chi that was infused with fire attribute divine power was like a fiery red phoenix that was ready to fire. After circling a few times in the air, it pounced at the giant. However, the giant didn't move at all, nor did it seem like it was going to defend itself. It just stood there quietly, waiting for the phoenix to arrive. Seeing this, the phoenix blinked its lively red eyes. Then, with a whoosh, it went straight through the giant's body. In an instant, the giant's body was ignited with a monstrous flame. However, the flame was quickly extinguished. The giant's body was intact, not even a scar could be found. What was going on? Leng Ruoxue was shocked. She had also injected her natal flames into her sword earlier. However, her flames did not seem to cause any harm to the giant. This was simply too unbelievable. Her flames, which had always been successful, had also failed at their first attempt. This fact made her not dare to take this giant lightly. Following that, Leng Ruoxue continuously struck out with her sword. Every single strike landed accurately on the giant's body. Unfortunately, just like before, she was unable to cause any damage to the giant. Leng Ruoxue was depressed. What kind of monster was this? Why wasn't her life flame useful anymore? At this moment, the giant's body started to glow with a faint light. Leng Ruoxue was confused and tried to swing her sword again. However, in that instant, the sword she had swung was reflected back on her body. At that moment, she felt a metallic taste in her throat and the pain in her internal organs was unbearable. Leng Ruoxue knew that she was injured. She quickly took out a healing pill and ate it. Then, she continued to attack. However, all of her attacks were reflected back at her, and the pain that got worse and worse almost made her faint. Sensing that something was amiss, Leng Ruoxue swallowed another pill and stopped her attacks temporarily. Then, her beautiful eyes started sizing up the giant. After observing for a long time, she still couldn't tell what the giant was made of, whether it was a real person or an illusion. However, she already knew the giant's strength, which was that any of her attacks were ineffective against him. Not only that, but the giant could also reflect her attacks. Therefore, no matter how many attacks she attacked, she would still hit herself. This was really too depressing. If this continued, how were they going to fight? Leng Ruoxue racked her brains for a long time, but she still could not think of a way to hurt the giant. Now she finally knew why Azure let this guy out. He even asked her to beat him. However, how could he defeat someone who was not afraid of any attack and could even reflect it? Just as Leng Ruoxue was at her wit's end, Uncle Long and the others were equally dumbfounded when they saw the giant through the light screen. What was this thing? They were very clear about the strength of Shue'er's abnormal flame, but now, Shue'er could not do anything about it. This was truly unbelievable. The demon turned his head and glanced at Sung, saying indifferently, "To think that you could think of such a method. Are you planning to let Shue'er stay inside forever?" The demon was a little unhappy. Uncle Long and the others might not know the giant's origin, but he knew that the giant was the guard of the God-protecting tower. They were born together with the God-protecting tower spirit. Besides protecting the God-protecting tower, their other purpose was to train. Therefore, the giant could be considered a product of chaos. Not only was it not afraid of the chaos divine fire, but it was also impossible to deal with it with conventional methods. Moreover, there was a certain rule to defeating the giant. Brute force or normal attacks would not work. To put it bluntly, if one wanted to defeat the giant, they had to rely on wisdom. In addition, as far as he knew, no one had been able to defeat this giant so far. As for whether Shue'er could defeat it, it would depend on whether she could find the giant's weakness. He couldn't help much in this regard. Moreover, seeing Shue'er getting injured in succession, his heart ached, and his gaze towards Tsang became even more unfriendly. However, Tsang didn't care about the daggers in his eyes. Instead, he said provocatively, "I believe that Nyo will think of a way." "Don't you have confidence in Nyo?" "Of course I'm confident." Hearing these words, the demon gritted his teeth. In his heart, he wished he could chop this hateful Tsang into 8 pieces. However, from the looks of it, he was afraid that he would not have the chance. Therefore, he felt a little aggrieved. "Since you're so confident, then just wait." "That's right, I have to send Nyo's grandfather and the others to continue their training." Azure seemed to have suddenly thought of this and disappeared after speaking. Seeing the obviously guilty Tsang leave with an excuse, the evildoer was even more furious. Uncle Long and the others expressed their deep sympathy for Leng Qingtian and the others. However, the person who was most worthy of sympathy now was Leng Ruoxue. The giant was too tall, so when she looked up for a while, she felt her shoulders and neck ache. Helplessly, she could only float in the air and barely meet the giant's eyes. The giant also seemed to not see her movements, and was very calm. "Can I ask you a question?" Leng Ruoxue tried to probe. "We can't." The giant said coldly, his refusal was very straightforward. Then can you tell me what you are? Leng Ruoxue changed her way of speaking and continued to ask. No comment. The giant's answer was simple and clean, without any hesitation. However, when Leng Ruoxue heard this, she was extremely depressed. This was because this giant was simply too uncooperative. Sob. Her inner villain was already filled with anger. This giant was too much of a scam, wasn't it? You just injured me. Leng Ruoxue complained, feeling wronged. I didn't even make a move. That was your own attack. The giant spoke the truth, not willing to be the scapegoat at all. When Leng Ruoxue heard the giant's honest words, she choked and almost passed out. Wasn't this rebelling? She had always been the one to anger others, but today, she was the one being angered. Giant, what are you trying to do? Can't you just cooperate and answer properly? Chapter 2103, The Battle with the Three Giant Brothers. 1. Leng Ruoxue's heart was filled with all sorts of anger, helplessness, and all in all, she finally understood what it meant to anger someone to death. This tall giant in front of her was like a piece of meat that couldn't be cut. No matter how sharp her blade was, she couldn't do anything to him. With such self-awareness, Leng Ruoxue dejectedly squatted at the corner of the wall and drew circles, cursing him. When the giant saw Leng Ruoxue's state, he remained unmoving and calm as if nothing had happened. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue became even more depressed. Ai. How could he hurt this giant? She didn't dare to attack the giant easily anymore. Otherwise, she would be the one being hit every time. Even if she had a body of steel, she wouldn't be able to withstand that kind of torment. After thinking for a long time, Leng Ruoxue still couldn't come up with a solution. However, even though she had her head lowered, she had been secretly observing from the corner of her eyes. The giant stood very straight, and his eyes were always looking straight ahead, without slanting at all, as if he had been specially trained. In the end, she decided not to waste her time thinking about it. She took out a recliner and lay on it. There was a small table beside the recliner, which was filled with all kinds of food, desserts, and fruits. She began to eat them slowly. Uncle Long and the others were dumbfounded when they saw this scene from the control room. What was Shuer doing? Why is he eating? However, seeing her eating so happily, they were all a little greedy. The black tortoise said to Aojie directly, "Little guy, I want to eat those things too. Make some for me. I don't know how to do it." Aojie gritted his teeth, but his answer was despised by the black tortoise. The black tortoise said disappointedly, "Ai. In this day and age, a man who couldn't cook was not a good man. As a man, you must be able to go to the hall, work in the kitchen, work without complaint, and do everything you want. You're not qualified." The black turtle's words made Uncle Long and the others' foreheads full of black lines. They all sighed in their hearts. According to the old turtle, they were all not good men. What kind of theory was that? They were not convinced. At the thought of this, they glared at the culprit. However, the old turtle could not understand their inner thoughts. Even if it did, it would not care. However, it looked at Aojie with more and more sympathy and disappointment, which made Aojie nervous. Uncle Dragon and the others did not look friendly either. Aojie, who could not bear it any longer, surrendered under the double pressure of the old turtle, Uncle Dragon, and the others. He took out his precious food and placed it in front of the old turtle. Seeing this, the old turtle nodded in satisfaction and then began to eat. Soon, the turtle finished eating and stared at Aojie. "I don't have any more, I've given them all to you." Aojie spread his hands and said helplessly. But Old Tortoise's disbelieving look made him so depressed that he wanted to scratch the wall. Woo, was his credibility that low? Ai. If there's no then there's no. I didn't expect to be full. The old turtle said after a long while after hearing Aojie's words. There was still a faint mist in its huge eyes, and it looked as pitiful as it could be. Furthermore, other than looking at Aojie with such a gaze, it also targeted Uncle Dragon and the rest. In the end, Uncle Dragon and the rest felt uncomfortable under its gaze and had to rummage through their storage rings to see if there was any ready-made food for it. Finally, the old turtle was satisfied. At the same time, the giant who was confronting Leng Ruoxue finally showed some reaction when he saw Leng Ruoxue take out a pile of fragrant food. "What are you eating?" the giant asked. "No comment." The narrow-minded Leng Ruoxue also replied. "Then you can at least tell me where you got this thing, right?" the giant asked, unwilling to give up. "I made it myself," Leng Ruoxue said honestly. "How can I have a taste of it?" the giant asked. "What, you can eat too?" Leng Ruoxue asked with a smile. "Of course I can, but I've never eaten anything before." The giant was very honest, and there was a rare shyness on his stiff face. In this way, he looked more lovely. "You're really pitiful. How about this, let's make a deal. I'll get you food, and you'll tell me everything about this training room, including you. How is it?" Leng Ruoxue said with a smile. The expression on her face was clearly that of a big bad wolf trying to abduct a little white rabbit. However, the giant started to think about it seriously. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue did not disturb him. However, she was secretly laughing in her heart. It seemed like using food as bait was the right thing to do, and she was most skilled in kidnapping. She didn't believe that any human or beast wouldn't be tempted by the food she made. Although she didn't know what this guy was. However, as long as he could eat, he would definitely not be able to escape. Sure enough, the giant, who had been thinking for a long time, compromised and agreed. He saw that the food on the table was decreasing little by little. If he didn't agree, he would have no share of these nice-smelling things. From this, it could be seen how great the temptation of delicious food was. For the sake of delicious food, he could even give up his unspeakable principle. Seeing that he had agreed, Leng Ruoxue was naturally not going to be stingy. After she invited the giant to sit beside her, Leng Ruoxue enthusiastically placed food into his hands. However, the food in front of her was clearly not enough to fill the gaps between the giant's teeth. Hence, she took out even more food that she had prepared earlier. Giant's face lit up when he saw this. Then, he began to tell Leng Ruoxue everything that had happened as he ate. From the giant's words, Leng Ruoxue found out that this place was just as Tsang had said. They could do any kind of trial as long as Tsang could think of it. All the trials would be conducted here. The giant in front of him was Tsang's guard. He was Tsang's companion. His purpose here was naturally to create obstacles for the trial takers. In addition, the giant also said that he was not Tsang's only guard. He was also the weakest of all the guards. After hearing this, Leng Ruoxue was so depressed that she wanted to scratch the wall. This fellow was the weakest, and she couldn't even deal with him. If it was someone stronger, what would she do? Could it be that Tsang was planning to let him stay here forever? No. This was absolutely not allowed. She still had a lot of things to do. At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue asked again, "By the way, do you have any weaknesses?" In other words, she was asking how she could defeat them. However, she would not ask so directly. "Weakness? We have no weakness." The giant frowned as he thought. How is this possible? This answer made Leng Ruoxue so depressed that she almost vomited blood. However, when she saw the giant's blank expression, she knew that the giant was speaking the truth. Chapter 2104, The Battle with the Three Giant Brothers, 2, I really didn't. We're invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire, and we can't die. So, I don't know what weaknesses I have. However, you can take your time to search for it. The giant laughed as he consoled her. In reality, he didn't tell her everything. However, he wouldn't reveal everything to Leng Ruoxue. Slowly search. How long would he have to find it? Leng Ruoxue was a little anxious and tried to negotiate. "I also want to look for it slowly, but my time is very tight. I really don't have that much time. Why don't you just tell me directly how I can get past you?" Didn't I tell you that as long as you can defeat me, you can get past me? The giant looked at Leng Ruoxue as he spoke. However, the words "Why is your memory so bad" were clearly written in his eyes. There was even a hint of sympathy in his eyes, which made Leng Ruoxue a little mad. You think you can win? Leng Ruoxue couldn't take it anymore and asked. Of course. However, if you want to defeat me, you can't rely on brute force. So, do your best. Although you've given me a lot of delicious food, I won't go easy on you. The giant said seriously. When Leng Ruoxue heard this, she nodded her head. After the giant finished eating, it stood back at its original spot and did not move. Leng Ruoxue spent the rest of the time observing. Occasionally, she would exchange a few moves with the giant. However, those few moves would still land on her body without any exception. After many experiments, Leng Ruoxue had discovered a certain pattern. That was, when the giant's body emitted a faint white halo, his strength and rebound would also be the strongest, and this halo would last for nearly an hour before disappearing. Every time the halo disappeared, it would appear again after 3 hours. During this period of time, although the giant's defense was still somewhat abnormal, at least it would not bounce back. However, the damage caused by swords, water, and fire was still minimal. Although this fact made Leng Ruoxue very depressed, it also made her braver. After observing for a long time, she finally noticed a slight difference. It would take about 4 hours for the giant's halo to appear, disappear, and reappear. However, during this period of time, there were more than 10 minutes of blank time. This was because during those 10 minutes, the giant's body had obviously become dimmer. Leng Ruoxue had purposely tested it out during that time and was surprised to find out that the giant's defense was at its weakest during that time. Not only could she injure him, but she could also not reflect the damage. It was definitely good news for her. However, this also meant that she had to defeat the giant in more than 10 minutes. And looking at the giant's tall and strong appearance, although his defense was low, it would not be easy to defeat him in such a short time. Moreover, the giant would be able to attack at that time. All of this made Leng Ruoxue realize that even though the giant looked simple and honest, he had not told her the whole truth. He was still holding back. However, now that she had found the secret to defeating the giant, she no longer cared about this. After all, if the giant had really told her everything, it would be quite meaningless, wouldn't it? After knowing this outcome, Leng Ruoxue's frustration from before disappeared and she calmed down. After another round of waiting, she finally found the moment when the giant was at its weakest. She was ready to strike. In short, she had to defeat the giant within 10 minutes this time. With this thought in mind, Leng Ruoxue launched an all-out attack. In an instant, a fire dragon leaped out from the tip of Leng Ruoxue's longsword. After circling in the air for a short while, the fire dragon pounced towards the giant. The fire dragon quickly wrapped around the giant and twisted with all its might. The muscles on the giant's arm expanded rapidly as it tried to break free from the fire dragon's restraint. However, the fire dragon twisted the giant tighter and tighter until the giant couldn't move at all. No matter how hard the giant struggled, he couldn't break free from the fire dragon's encirclement. This fact made the giant depressed and he couldn't help but roar. Ah! The giant roared and exerted more force in his arms. Leng Ruoxue felt a sharp pain in her eardrums and her heart was slightly uncomfortable. This surprise surprised her. She didn't expect that even though the giant was trapped, his roar could still hurt her. Was this the so-called sound attack? At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue conjured a green phoenix of the wind attribute and commanded it to attack the giant. The beautiful phoenix arrived in front of the giant. First, it used its sharp claws to grab the giant's head. Then, it stabbed its sharp claws into the giant's chest. After a few scratches, the giant's body was covered in wounds. At this time, the fire dragon released the giant and imitated the phoenix. At this time, the giant had lost the power to fight back. Under the attack of the dragon and phoenix, the tall giant finally fell to the ground in pieces. They turned into specks of starlight and disappeared. Did this count as her victory? Leng Ruoxue was not too sure. At this moment, the space twisted again. Another giant that was even bigger and stronger than the previous one appeared in front of Leng Ruoxue. This giant was a divine emperor. When Leng Ruoxue saw this, she was extremely depressed. This wasn't the end. This guy's strength was above his, so he was even more difficult to deal with. However, it was fortunate that she had already found the pattern to defeat these giants. Otherwise, she would have vomited blood in anger. When the giant saw Leng Ruoxue, his first words were, "Defeat me and you can continue to the next trial." Upon hearing this, Leng Ruoxue's first reaction was, "More? You bastard!" Song was planning to tire her to death. Or did he really plan to trap himself here for the rest of his life? No matter which of the above options, she didn't want them. However, this giant was obviously more agile than the previous one and seemed to be able to read people's minds. He turned to Leng Ruoxue and said, "Of course, if you can advance here, even if you can't defeat me, you can still leave. However, if you do that, you will have a stain on your reputation. So, my opinion is that you should defeat me." In Leng Ruoxue's opinion, these words were as good as not saying anything. In fact, they even had the suspicion of angering the giant to death. Hence, when Leng Ruoxue heard this, she only rolled her eyes at the giant and did not reply. Following that, Leng Ruoxue lay back down on the deck chair. She decided to rest for a while before deciding what to do. Since this giant wouldn't take the initiative to attack, she still had some time. When the giant saw Leng Ruoxue lying down on the recliner, he found a place to sit down as well. He continued, "Do you still have the food you gave to third brother? I also want one." This guy was really impolite. Leng Ruoxue couldn't help but mutter to herself. Then, she smiled and asked, "That guy earlier was third bro? Then are you the second?" Chapter 2105, The Battle with the Three Giant Brothers, 3 We are the three giant brothers. If you beat me, it'll be our big brother's turn to receive you. He has the strength of a reverent god, so you have a fight to fight. Hee hee. After the giant finished speaking, he even laughed wretchedly, as if he was gloating over Leng Ruoxue's misfortune. This caused Leng Ruoxue's mood to deteriorate. It seemed like she wouldn't be able to leave for a while. However, in order to build a good relationship with the giant, she still took out food to serve him. After that, the two of them started doing what they were supposed to do. As the giant ate the delicacies, Leng Ruoxue took out her pill furnace and started to refine pills. After an unknown period of time, Leng Ruoxue had finished refining all the pills she wanted. She raised her head and saw that the giant was still eating. Furthermore, the way he ate was rather elegant. At least, compared to third brother's gobbling, the way he ate was more pleasing to the eye. When the giant received Leng Ruoxue's gaze, he only returned a smile and continued to eat demurely. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue suddenly launched an attack. The giant reacted quickly and leaped up, dodging the attack and landing lightly on the ground. "You're so unfriendly. How could you sneak attack me when I'm eating?" After the giant landed on the ground, he said in a slightly aggrieved manner. However, he did not delay in sending the food into his mouth. Upon seeing this, Leng Ruoxue's forehead was filled with black lines. She thought to herself, "This glutton. Haven't you heard that all is good in war? I just wanted to test your reaction." Leng Ruoxue laughed evilly. However, her heart felt heavy. This fellow's reaction speed was surprisingly fast. It was obviously not something that third brother could compare to. "Are you satisfied with my reaction?" The giant rolled his eyes and asked helplessly. "Very satisfied, continue to maintain it." With that, Leng Ruoxue lay back on the recliner. The giant saw her like this and did not disturb her. He continued to focus on eating his food. However, Leng Ruoxue wasn't really so tired that she wanted to lie down. She was thinking and lowering the guard of this giant. However, it didn't seem to be very successful. This giant was much more cunning than third brother. After the giant finished eating, he turned his attention to Leng Ruoxue and asked in a serious tone, "When do we start fighting? Can we not fight?" Leng Ruoxue asked with a smile. "Of course not. Even if it's just for fun, we still have to fight." The giant replied with a smile. "But there's a saying that goes, one who eats others will be short-lived. You've eaten so much of my food, do you have the cheek to fight me?" Leng Ruoxue asked indifferently. "These are two different things. Although I ate your food, I can still give you some water. We're even." The giant said. "Go easy." "How are you going to go easy on me?" Leng Ruoxue was a little curious. This fellow actually dared to say that he would go easy on her. Wasn't he afraid of Tsang getting angry? "I want attack." "Don't worry, I won't reflect it," the giant said after some thought. "But, isn't it hard to break through your defense?" Leng Ruoxue said in understanding. She could tell that this giant was different from the one from before. Even though this giant had said that he wouldn't rebound, who knew what other strange abilities he had? "Then I won't defend either, this should be fine, right?" The giant thought for a while and made a decision. "Really?" Leng Ruoxue asked doubtfully. Hearing giant's words, she felt even more uneasy. Would things be that simple? She didn't believe that this cunning fellow would be so kind. More importantly, if the giant really did that, wouldn't her trial be meaningless? Thinking of this, she hesitated. Yes, really," the giant promised. When he saw Leng Ruoxue's expression, he laughed to himself. His master was right. He promised not to attack or defend, but his master's future master did not dare to attack. This result made the giant a little proud. However, Leng Ruoxue's next words left giant in a dilemma. If that's the case, then it's decided. This time, Leng Ruoxue didn't hesitate and spoke directly. The giant was dumbfounded. It shouldn't be like this, right? How did this happen? Why was it different from what he had imagined? What went wrong? The giant couldn't understand. "Receive my attack." Ignoring the giant's dazed look, Leng Ruoxue shouted and struck out with her sword. When the sword Qi, which was terrifyingly cold and extremely sharp and contained divine power, hit the giant's body, it did not even leave a mark. Leng Ruoxue could not help but frown at this result. She was certain that the giant in front of her had no defense, but her sword could not hurt him. What did this mean? This meant that this giant was truly invulnerable. Wait a minute. She seemed to have missed something. A light bulb went off in Leng Ruoxue's head. She suddenly remembered what the giant had told her. He said that they were invulnerable to weapons and fire and water. When the giant had said those words earlier, she had thought that he was referring to himself. However, now that she thought about it, he was probably not the only one who had said those words. That was because the giant from before was only immune to her attacks when the halo appeared. However, she was still able to move him at other times. Although he would rebound back, at least he would not be as invulnerable as this one. He wondered if the flames would be of any use to him. With such a thought in mind, Leng Ruoxue decided not to use her sword or divine power. Instead, she would try using fire. A small flame suddenly appeared on her slender white fingertips. The flame was only the size of a fingernail, dark purple in color, and extremely hot. After seeing the flame, a strange expression appeared on the giant's face, and his heart was a little panicked. However, he tried his best to appear calm, but when he saw the flame leaping towards him, his face still showed a trace of crack. Seeing this, Leng Ruoxue knew that this flame was most likely his nemesis. Instantly, her heart relaxed. The flames she released quickly engulfed the giant and instantly ignited a huge flame. After the flames were extinguished, the giant disappeared as well. Evildoer, who was in the control room, turned to look at Song, who had returned a while ago, and asked, "Isn't the constitution of your accompanying guard the same?" Although he knew that some guards were not afraid of the divine fire, he was not sure that there were still some who were afraid. "Of course it's different. Azure said proudly. Then what's the next one afraid of? The demon's curiosity was piqued. You'll know when you see for yourself. Song kept them in suspense and had a mysterious look on his face, causing the people present to clench their teeth. However, they still turned their gazes to the light screen in resignation. At this moment, another giant appeared in front of Leng Ruoxue. However, this giant's height and body size were not as huge as the previous two. However, compared to normal people, he was still considered a giant. After all, he was almost 3 meters tall. Leng Ruoxue had to look up to him. This fact made her feel a little vexed. Why was she so short? When the giant saw Leng Ruoxue, he said directly, I'm different from second brother and third brother. I don't know how to rebound, and am not invulnerable. However, am not afraid of your divine fire, and am stronger than you. Therefore, you must defeat me with your real strength. Otherwise, you won't pass. And his strength was reverent god level. By the way, although your food is very tempting, I'm not interested. The giant added, and his addition also made Leng Ruoxue give up on the idea of continuing with her gourmet strategy. After some thought, Leng Ruoxue smiled and said, I know that you're a reverent god and am just a puny divine king. It's almost impossible for me to defeat you. So, I've decided to cultivate first. Can you not disturb me? Sure. The giant nodded in agreement and found a place to sit down. Leng Ruoxue continued to lie on the deck chair and closed her eyes. When the giant saw this, he was a little speechless. He couldn't take it anymore and said, Didn't you want to cultivate? Why are you sleeping? I didn't sleep. This is one of my cultivation methods. Leng Ruoxue did not even lift her eyelids as she replied softly. Upon hearing this, the giant fell silent. However, his gaze never left Leng Ruoxue. He knew that Leng Ruoxue was different from the other cultivators who had been thrown in here by their master. Therefore, they could not treat Leng Ruoxue the same way they treated the others. This could be considered as Leng Ruoxue's special privilege. They had no doubts about this. In fact, it was useless. This was allowed by the master. Leng Ruoxue closed her eyes and regulated her breathing for a while before standing up. Then, her beautiful eyes stared straight at the boss giant, and she attacked him without saying a word. The sword instantly appeared in her hand. This time, she didn't use the divine skill of the fire attribute, but used the wind. The swift and fierce sword chi was accompanied by a cold wind, which turned into sharp wind blades and attacked the big boss giant. When the big boss giant saw this, he stood up calmly and dodged a few times. Several human-shaped shadows appeared on his body and he dodged the wind blades. However, he did not attack. Instead, he looked straight at Leng Ruoxue and said with a slight dissatisfaction, Too slow. You can't hit me at all. Leng Ruoxue was a little taken aback by the giant boss words. Could this be the difference in power? She rarely felt this kind of defeat. After all, she could deal with ordinary reverent god-level cultivators as long as she added her own life flame into her divine skill. Although it might not kill them directly, it would not be a problem to seriously injure them. However, the person in front of her was not afraid of her natal flame. Therefore, she could feel the obvious gap between her strength and that of a reverent god-level cultivator. However, it was undeniable that her defeat had aroused her fighting spirit. It was not easy to find such a good sparring partner. Chapter 2106, Returning to U City, 1. The fighting spirit in Leng Ruoxue's heart was ignited, and her beautiful eyes that were looking at the giant boss became more and more fiery. Following that, she sat down cross-legged and concentrated on absorbing the spiritual chi in the room. Although this room was used for the trial, the spiritual energy in the room was rather dense. After Tsang brought Leng Ruoxue here, he had specially set up a spiritual energy gathering formation in the room. Hence, the spiritual energy in the room was even more abundant than before. After Leng Ruoxue had calmed down and cultivated, the big boss giant sat down again and closed his eyes. Uncle Long and the others in the control room saw this and knew that Shuer wouldn't wake up for a while. Thinking of this, they all turned their eyes to Tsang. When Tsang saw this, he smiled faintly and said, "Nyo won't be able to wake up for a while, why don't you guys leave first?" "Yes, yes." Uncle Long and the others quickly nodded. "I'm not leaving," the demon said coldly. "I'm not asking you." Tsang rolled his eyes at the evildoer and said unhappily. He knew that this guy wouldn't leave, so he naturally didn't include him in the list of people he asked. Then, Tsang moved Uncle Long and the others out of the control room. Bing Yao, who had been waiting in the garden, saw Uncle Long and the others and went up to them excitedly. He said anxiously, "Where's Shuer? Where's that demon? They didn't come out." Uncle Long glanced at Bing Yao and replied, "When will they come out?" Bing Yao could not help but ask. "I don't know, but I guess they won't be able to come out for a while. Senior Tsang has arranged a godly venerable rank sparring partner for Shuer. Shuer can't beat that guy, so she's cultivating in the place Senior Tsang has arranged for her." Uncle Long explained. "I see." Bing Yao was conflicted. "What's wrong? Are you anxious?" Uncle Long said. Although he didn't know the time ratio of the outside world and Tsang, he knew that even if they were only there for a short time, it would be like a year for Bing Yao. "No, I didn't. I'm just a little worried about Qing Yang," Bing Yao said honestly. His junior brother must have suffered in the hands of Wu Xiao. It was fine if he didn't know where Qing Yang was before, but now that he knew, he couldn't save Qing Yang immediately. Therefore, he felt like there was a kitten scratching his heart, and he couldn't calm down. It's only human nature to be worried. However, since Shuer hasn't come out yet, we can't go to the Imperial City to save Qing Yang. You understand? Without that girl, the chances of us being in danger are very high. Uncle Long explained. Although Shuer was not as powerful as them, she had a trump card that was much more powerful than them. Hence, she had to be involved in this. If they acted alone and Shuer found out, the consequences would be unimaginable. I know. Bing Yao nodded and changed the topic, asking about their special training. After chatting for a while, everyone went back to their rooms and did what they were supposed to do. Time in the God-protecting tower slowly passed. Leng Ruoxue, who had been cultivating in the training room, was not only surrounded by spiritual energy, but also countless spiritual energy that were rushing into her body. The spiritual energy that entered her body moved in a regular pattern, forming a circulation. Wherever the spiritual energy went, the veins in her body would expand, and she would continue to absorb more spiritual energy. Just like that, after a long time, she finally touched the threshold of the Divine Emperor realm. She could finally break through to the deity emperor level. In an instant, Leng Ruoxue opened her beautiful eyes. The joy on her face could not be concealed. Although it wasn't a promotion of the heaven-defying incantation, her strength had finally improved after cultivating for so long. This was definitely good news for her. Moreover, the spiritual qi she needed was simply unimaginable. In short, it was a scam. When Leng Ruoxue could faintly sense that the laws of heaven and earth were about to descend upon her, she tried to move the succubus and the other small beasts out of the bangle. With a single thought, countless small beasts appeared in front of her. With one look, Leng Ruoxue was relieved. Ever since the special training began, these little beasts were restricted by Tsang, just like the house. Now that they were able to come out, it was probably because Tsang had shown mercy. When the little beasts saw their master, they pounced into Leng Ruoxue's arms one after another and started to complain to her. Some of them called her big sister while others called her master. In fact, they were expressing their longing for Leng Ruoxue through their words. The little beasts, who had always liked to act coquettishly, were even acting pitifully. Leng Ruoxue's heart softened as she watched them. Leng Ruoxue touched this and hugged that. Then, she instructed them to find their own places. Following that, the laws of heaven and earth for advancement descended. The law of heaven and earth that was emitting a dazzling light enveloped Leng Ruoxue in a gentle glow. After a while, Leng Ruoxue had completed her advancement and had the power of a divine emperor. Most of Leng Ruoxue's spiritual beasts were not able to advance in rank this time. However, they still managed to obtain quite a lot of benefits from it. The spiritual qi in their bodies was almost full, and the ones who benefited the most this time were those little silver rats. Right now, the weakest among them was already a 9th-ranked sacred beast. This was something that was impossible in the past. Therefore, they were all so excited that they fell into a daze. He was unable to come back to his senses for a long time. At this moment, Tsang also appeared in front of Leng Ruoxue. "Girl, congratulations on your breakthrough," Azure said with a smile. "Thank you," he said. Leng Ruoxue said indifferently. Then, her beautiful eyes looked at Tsang, waiting for him to continue. She believed that Tsang would not come in for no reason. "Girl, you've broken through. Do you want to leave this place?" Tsang Ru and Leng Ruoxue asked for her opinion. "I haven't defeated him yet." Leng Ruoxue pointed at the giant boss who was resting with his eyes closed. This fellow was pretty calm. He didn't even open his eyes to take a look when there was such a huge commotion earlier. "With your current strength, you can't beat him." Although Niu had advanced by 1 rank, there was still an insurmountable gap between a divine emperor and a reverent god. In addition, the giant was not afraid of her life flame. It could be said that Niu had no chance of winning against the giant now. Therefore, it was not optimistic that Niu would fight the giant to the death now. However, if Niu insisted on staying here until she defeated the giant boss, it would not stop her. However, it knew that such a situation was unlikely to happen. As expected, after Leng Ruoxue heard Tsang's words, she confirmed, "I know I can't beat him, but if I'm not wrong, it doesn't matter if I can beat him or not, right?" "Yes. If you're a reverent god now, you'll have to defeat him before I let you leave. However, you only have the strength of a divine emperor, so it's unrealistic for you to defeat him. Besides, I've already said before the special training that you'll only be considered to have completed the special training after you've advanced to the next rank.